I stood in the rain, my wedding letter dissolving in my hands, as the man who promised to marry me spat the words that shattered everything. A barren woman has no place here. I was stranded, alone, humiliated, until a stranger with 9 children emerged from the mountain mist and offered me something I'd stopped believing in, a second chance. This is my story. Stay until the end to see how I went from rejected to irreplaceable. Comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The wagon wheel hit another rut, and Lena Crowell's teeth clacked together so hard she tasted blood. She'd been traveling for 6 days, 6 endless days of dust, bone-rattling roads, and the smell of mule sweat so thick it clung to her clothes like a second skin. Her fingers ached from gripping the wooden bench. Her spine felt like it had been beaten with a hammer, and every muscle in her body screamed for rest. But none of that mattered anymore. Because in less than an hour, she would meet Thomas Reddick, the man whose letters had been her lifeline for 8 months. The man who had promised her a home, a future, a place to belong. The man who had written, in his careful, slanted script, "A woman's worth isn't measured by what she can give, but by who she is. Come to me, Lena. I will honor you." She had read those words 100 times, 1,000. They were burned into her memory, a torch in the darkness that had swallowed her old life whole. "Almost there, miss," the wagon driver called over his shoulder. He was a weathered man named Cyrus, with a face like cracked leather and eyes that had seen too much of the world to be surprised by anything. "Reddick's place is just over that ridge." Lena's heart lurched. She smoothed down her travel-stained skirts, the best dress she owned, now wrinkled and spotted with mud. She'd tried to keep it clean, tried to preserve some shred of dignity for this moment, but the mountains didn't care about dignity. The mountains took everything and gave nothing back. Except, maybe, Thomas Reddick. Except, maybe, hope. The wagon crested the hill, and Lena saw it, a sprawling homestead nestled in a valley, with a sturdy log house, a barn, and fields that rolled out like a patchwork quilt. Smoke curled from the chimney, chickens scratched in the yard. It looked like everything she'd dreamed of, solid, permanent, real. "There he is," Cyrus said, nodding toward a figure standing on the porch. Lena's breath caught. Thomas Reddick was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a beard that shadowed his jaw. He stood with his arms crossed, watching the wagon approach with an expression Lena couldn't quite read. Not welcoming, not eager, something else. The wagon rolled to a stop. Cyrus set the brake and climbed down, offering Lena his hand. Her legs trembled as she stepped onto solid ground. Whether from exhaustion or nerves, she couldn't say. "Mr. Reddick," Cyrus called out, touching the brim of his hat. "Got your package from Kenton Valley, safe and sound, just like you paid for." Thomas Reddick didn't move. His eyes, cold, gray, like stones pulled from a frozen river, fixed on Lena with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Mr. Reddick?" Lena's voice came out smaller than she intended. She cleared her throat, tried again. "It's me, Lena Crowell. I got your last letter, and I came as soon as... I know who you are." His voice was flat, empty, like a door slamming shut. Lena's smile faltered. I brought the things you asked for, the seeds and the fabric, and... Did you think I wouldn't find out?" The words hung in the air like a noose. Lena blinked. "Find out? I don't understand. Don't play stupid with me, woman." Thomas descended the porch steps, each footfall deliberate, heavy. "I had questions after your last letter, things you didn't say, things you danced around. So I wrote to your cousin in Kenton Valley, asked some direct questions." Ice flooded Lena's veins. "You wrote to Margaret?" "Damn right I did." He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the disgust twisting his features. "And she was real helpful. Told me everything I needed to know, about your marriage, about why it ended, about why you're really here." "Thomas, please." Lena reached for him, but he jerked back like she was diseased. "Don't touch me." Cyrus shifted uncomfortably on the wagon seat. "Listen, folks, maybe I should..." "You can go," Thomas snapped. "Your job's done." "Now hold on." Cyrus looked at Lena, concern creasing his weathered face. Miss Crowell paid for passage both ways if things didn't work out. That was the agreement. Things aren't working out. Thomas's jaw clenched. But that's not my problem. Lena's world tilted. What are you saying? He finally looked at her, really looked at her, and the contempt in his eyes was like a physical blow. I'm saying you lied to me. You let me believe you were a decent, honest woman looking for a fresh start. You never mentioned you were damaged goods. The words hit like a slap. Lena recoiled, her face burning. I never lied. You sure as hell didn't tell the truth. Thomas's voice rose, sharp enough to scatter the chickens. Your cousin told me everything. How your husband left you after 5 years because you couldn't give him children. How the doctors said you're barren as a salt flat. How you've been passed around from relative to relative like unwanted baggage because nobody knows what to do with a broken woman. Each word was a knife, precise and cruel. Lena's vision blurred. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I asked you in my letters, Thomas continued, relentless. I asked if there was anything I should know, anything that might affect our arrangement, and you wrote back. He pulled a crumpled letter from his pocket, shook it at her. You wrote back, I have nothing to hide. I come to you with an honest heart. Well, that was a damn lie, wasn't it? I didn't think, Lena's voice cracked. I didn't think it mattered. You said a woman's worth wasn't measured by what she can give. Thomas laughed, bitter and harsh. You really think I meant that? You think any man means that? He shook his head, disgust radiating from every line of his body. I need sons, Miss Crowell. I need heirs to work this land, to carry on my name. What good is a wife who can't provide that? You're useless to me. The world went very quiet. Somewhere a crow cawed. The wind rustled through the pine trees. Lena heard her own heartbeat, loud and painful in her ears. Please, she whispered, I have nowhere else to go. That's not my concern. Thomas, I sold everything. I used every penny I had to get here. If you turned me away, you should have thought of that before you deceived me. He turned his back on her, started toward the house. Cyrus, get her off my property. Now see here. Cyrus climbed down from the wagon, his face reddening. You can't just leave a woman stranded in the middle of nowhere. That ain't Christian, and it sure ain't decent. Thomas paused on the porch steps. Then take her back where she came from. I told you, she paid for a round trip if needed. She didn't pay for immediate return. I've got other deliveries to make, and I'm not heading back to Kenton Valley for another 2 weeks. Not my problem. Thomas disappeared into the house. The door slammed with a finality that echoed across the valley. Lena stood frozen, her mind unable to process what had just happened. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. She had come so far, sacrificed so much, believed so completely. Miss Crowell, Cyrus's voice was gentle, pitying. I'm sorry. I truly am. But I can't force the man to take you in, and I can't change my route. I've got contracts, obligations. I understand. The words came out mechanical, distant, like someone else was speaking with her mouth. There's a town about 15 miles north. Millbrook. Small place, but they've got a boarding house. Maybe you could... 15 miles? I could take you part way. I'm heading northeast anyway, and I could drop you at the crossroads. From there, it's only about 8 miles on foot. You could make it before nightfall if you... Thank you, Mr. Cyrus. Lena turned away before he could see her face crumble. That's very kind. Miss Crowell, please, just give me a moment. She walked. She didn't know where she was going, didn't care. Her feet carried her away from the wagon, away from Thomas Reddick's house, away from the dream that had shattered like glass against stone. The sky was darkening. Clouds rolled in from the west, heavy and swollen with rain. The first drops hit her face, cold and accusing. Lena kept walking. She found herself on a narrow trail that wound into the forest. The trees closed around her like a fist, blocking out the light, blocking out everything. The rain came harder, turning the path to mud. Her shoes, her good shoes saved for this occasion, sank into the muck with every step. She should turn back, should return to the wagon, accept Cyrus's offer, try to salvage something from this disaster. But she couldn't. She couldn't face his pity, couldn't endure the weight of his knowing eyes, couldn't bear the thought of explaining to anyone else why she wasn't wanted, wasn't enough, would never be enough. Barren. Damaged goods, useless. The words chased her through the rain, through the mud, through the growing darkness. She stumbled over a root, caught herself against a tree trunk. Her hands were shaking, her whole body was shaking. She had been so careful, so cautious. After her husband, after Daniel left her, after the divorce that scandalized her family, after being shuttled from cousin to aunt to sister like a burden no one wanted to carry, she had learned to guard her secrets, to present only the parts of herself that were acceptable, palatable, wanted. She had read Thomas's letters and seen a man who claimed to value character over circumstance, who wrote about building a life together based on mutual respect and partnership, who had made her believe for the first time in years that maybe she could be loved not despite her flaws, but as a whole person. She had been such a fool. The rain was coming down in sheets now, soaking through her dress, her petticoats, her skin. Lena's teeth chattered. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold in some warmth, but it was useless. The cold was inside her now, deeper than any rain could reach. She saw a massive sycamore tree ahead, its branches spreading wide enough to offer some shelter. She stumbled toward it, her legs barely supporting her weight. When she reached the trunk, she collapsed against it, sliding down until she sat in the mud and rotting leaves. This was it then. This was how it ended. Alone in the woods, rejected by a man she'd never even met, with nowhere to go and no one who cared. Lena reached into her pocket with numb fingers, pulled out Thomas's letters. The paper was already damp, the ink beginning to run. She stared at the words she'd memorized, the promises that meant nothing. A woman's worth isn't measured by what she can give. Lies. All lies. All. She let the letters fall from her hands, watched them dissolve into the mud. 8 months of hope. 8 months of careful planning and desperate belief, reduced to pulp. The sobs came then, tearing out of her chest like wild animals. She buried her face in her hands and cried, for the life she'd lost, for the future she'd never have, for the children she'd never bear, for every cruel word and pitying look and door closed in her face. She cried until she had nothing left, until she was hollow and empty, and so tired. The rain pounded down. The darkness thickened. Lena closed her eyes and let it all wash over her, wondering distantly if this was how she would die. Alone, unwanted, forgotten. And then she heard voices. Told you we should have taken the ridge path. The ridge path is twice as long, and we'd still be walking in this mess. Pa, I'm tired. I know, sweetheart. We're almost home. Lena's eyes snapped open. Through the rain and the gathering twilight, she saw movement on the trail. Figures approaching, several of them. She pressed herself against the tree trunk, suddenly aware of how she must look. Muddy, bedraggled, a wild woman in the woods. She should call out, should ask for help, but her voice was frozen in her throat. The figures came closer. A man led the group, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a wide-brimmed hat that channeled the rain off to the sides. Behind him came children. Lena's confused mind tried to count them and gave up. So many children, ranging from teenagers to toddlers, all trudging through the mud with the weary determination of those who knew the journey wasn't over yet. The man stopped suddenly. His head turned, and even in the dim light, Lena saw him spot her. "Hold up," he said to the children. His voice was deep, calm, with a mountain drawl that softened the edges of his words. He approached slowly, cautiously, like someone trying not to spook a wounded animal. Lena couldn't move, couldn't speak, could only stare as he crouched down a few feet away, his face coming into view. He was younger than she'd expected from his voice, maybe 35, with dark hair curling under his hat and eyes that caught the fading light. His face was weathered, lined by sun and wind and hard work, but there was a gentleness in his expression that made something in Lena's chest crack open. "Ma'am," he said quietly. "You hurt?" Lena shook her head, then nodded, then shook her head again, because how could she explain that yes, she was hurt, but not in any way he could see or help? "You lost?" Another headshake. The man studied her for a long moment, taking in her sodden dress, her muddy shoes, the tear tracks on her face. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Not pity, but recognition. like he knew exactly what he was seeing. "You came for Reddick, didn't you?" Lena's breath hitched. "How did you—" "Saw the wagon pass earlier. Reddick's been talking in town about his mail-order bride coming." The man's jaw tightened. "I'm guessing it didn't go well." Shame burned through Lena's chest. Even this stranger knew. Everyone would know. The woman who wasn't wanted wasn't enough. Wasn't— "Hey." The man's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. "Whatever he told you, whatever reason he gave, it's not your fault. You hear me? Thomas Reddick is a mean-spirited bastard who gets his kicks making people feel small. This is on him, not you." The kindness in his words was too much. Lena felt fresh tears spill over, hot against her cold cheeks. "I have nowhere to go," she whispered. The man was quiet for a moment. Then he stood, offered his hand. "You do now." Lena stared at his hand like it was a snake. "What?" "I'm Jonas Hale. I've got a place about 3 miles north." "It's not much, just a cabin and some land, but it's dry, and we've got food, and you're welcome to shelter there until you figure out your next move." "I don't understand. Why would you—" "Because it's the right thing to do." Jonas's hand remained steady, waiting. "And because I've got 9 kids back there who've learned that when you see someone in need, you help. Can't very well preach that and then leave you out here in the rain, can I?" 9 kids. The thought should have been absurd, overwhelming. Instead, it was the detail that made Lena's hand move, reaching up to grasp his. His grip was warm, solid, calloused from work. He pulled her to her feet with effortless strength, steadying her when she swayed. "Thank you," Lena managed. Jonas nodded, then turned to the children who'd been waiting patiently. "All right, crew, we've got a guest. Ruthie, give Miss—" He paused, looking at Lena. "Crowell," she supplied. "Lena Crowell. Give Miss Crowell your spare cloak. Samuel, you take the lead. I'll bring up the rear. Let's get home before this rain gets any worse." The children sprang into action with practiced efficiency. A teenage girl, Ruthie, Lena assumed, appeared at her side, draping a thick wool cloak over her shoulders. It smelled like wood smoke and pine sap, and the warmth was immediate, merciful. "Thank you," Lena said to the girl. Ruthie just nodded, her dark eyes cautious but not unkind, before falling back into line with her siblings. They walked. Jonas kept pace beside Lena, close enough that she felt his presence like a shield against the storm. The children moved ahead, their voices carrying back through the rain, bickering, laughing, asking questions that Jonas answered with patient humor. "How old are they?" Lena asked, needing to focus on something beyond her own misery. "Ruthie's 15, Samuel's 13. Then there's Margaret, we call her Maggie, she's 11. The twins, Daniel and David, are 9. Esther's 7. Jacob's 5, Rose's 3, and the baby, Eliza, just turned 1 last month." 9 children. 9. Lena's mind reeled. "Your wife must be dead." The word was gentle but final. 3 years now. Fever took her." "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "It's all right. You couldn't have known." Jonas adjusted his hat, rain streaming off the brim. "We manage. The older ones help with the younger ones. We've got a routine. It works." But Lena heard what he wasn't saying. The exhaustion buried under the calm, the weight of raising 9 children alone, the daily struggle to keep everyone fed and safe and whole. They crested a small hill, and through the rain, Lena saw lights. A cabin materialized out of the darkness, larger than she'd expected but still rough-hewn and simple. Smoke rose from the chimney. Windows glowed with warm golden light. It looked like a miracle. The children surged ahead, whooping with relief as they reached the porch. Jonas guided Lena up the steps, opened the door, and ushered her into warmth. The cabin was chaos. Children everywhere, shedding wet clothes, tracking mud, talking over each other. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, crackling with a fire that chased away the chill. The space was cluttered but clean. Boots lined up by the door, coats on hooks, dishes stacked neatly on shelves. Lena stood just inside the doorway, dripping onto the floor, unsure what to do. "Ruthie!" Jonas called over the noise. "Help Miss Crowell get dried off. Find her something warm to wear. Yes, Pa. Ruthie appeared again, her long dark hair braided down her back. She gestured for Lena to follow. Come on, ma'am. We've got a spare room in the back. Lena followed the girl through the main room, past a long wooden table surrounded by mismatched chairs, past a ladder leading to a loft overhead, to a small room barely bigger than a closet. A narrow bed was pushed against one wall, a faded quilt folded at the foot. A single window looked out into the rainy darkness. It's not much, Ruthie said, her voice carefully neutral. But it's private. It's perfect. Thank you. Ruthie pulled a dress from a wooden chest at the foot of the bed. This was Ma's. Might be a little loose on you, but it's dry. She set it on the bed along with a towel. I'll give you some privacy to change. When you're ready, come back to the main room. Pa's probably starting supper. She left, closing the door quietly behind her. Alone for the first time in hours, Lena sank onto the bed. Her hands were shaking again, but not from cold, from the sheer impossibility of what had just happened. An hour ago, she'd been ready to give up, ready to let the rain and the darkness and the crushing weight of rejection swallow her whole. And now she was here, in a stranger's home, being offered shelter and kindness by a man who had no reason to help her. She didn't understand it, didn't trust it, but she was too tired, too broken to question it anymore tonight. Lena peeled off her sodden dress, her layers of wet petticoats, her ruined shoes. She dried herself with the towel, then slipped into the borrowed dress. It was simple, made of sturdy brown cotton, worn soft from years of washing. It did hang loose on her frame, but it was warm and dry, and that was all that mattered. She took a shaky breath, ran her fingers through her tangled hair, and opened the door. The main room had settled into a more organized chaos. Jonas stood at the stove, stirring something in a large pot. The older children were setting the table, while the younger ones played quietly near the fire. When Lena emerged, several pairs of eyes turned her way. Miss Crowell, Jonas said, glancing over his shoulder. You look warmer. Good. Supper's almost ready. Hope you like stew. Yes, thank you. Lena hovered uncertainly. Is there something I can do to help? Jonas looked at her for a long moment, something thoughtful in his expression. You know how to slice bread? Yes? Loaves are in that basket by the table, knives on the counter. We'll need enough for everyone. It was such a simple task, such a normal thing, but Lena felt something loosen in her chest as she moved to the counter. Her hands found the knife, the bread, the rhythm of slicing. Around her, the family continued their preparations, Jonas ladling stew into bowls, Ruthie pouring milk for the younger children, Samuel bringing in more firewood. They moved like a dance they'd performed 1,000 times, each person knowing their part, anticipating the needs of the others. Lena finished slicing the bread and brought it to the table. Jonas was already seating the children, youngest at one end where he could help them, oldest at the other where they could help each other. You can sit here, Jonas said, indicating a spot near the middle, between Maggie and Esther. Lena took her seat. Maggie, a serious-faced girl with her mother's dress and her father's dark hair, scooted over to make room. Esther, a tiny thing with wild curls and gaps in her teeth, stared at Lena with open curiosity. You're pretty, Esther announced. Esther, Ruthie warned from across the table. Mind your manners. But she is. Esther looked to Jonas for support. Isn't she, Pa? Jonas's lips twitched. She is, but Miss Crowell might not want to be stared at while she's trying to eat. Esther considered this, then turned her attention to her bowl with single-minded determination. Lena hid a smile, the first real smile she'd managed in days. Jonas bowed his head. The children followed suit, even the baby in her high chair going still. Lord, Jonas said, his voice quiet but clear, we thank you for this food, for this home, for each other. We thank you for keeping us safe on the trail today, and we ask your blessing on our guest, Miss Crowell, who's had a hard day and needs your comfort. Guide her path, whatever it may be. Amen. Amen, the children echoed. Lena's throat tightened. She couldn't remember the last time someone had prayed for her comfort, her path, her well-being. The meal was simple: venison stew with carrots and potatoes, thick slices of bread, fresh milk. But it was warm and filling, and Lena ate until the hollow ache in her stomach finally eased. Around her, the family talked. The boys discussed a fort they were building in the woods. Maggie complained about having to do extra chores because Samuel had shirked his. Ruthie quietly helped Rose eat without spilling. Jonas mediated disputes, answered questions, and somehow managed to eat his own supper in between. It was loud. It was messy. It was the most beautiful thing Lena had ever seen. After supper, the older children cleared the table while Jonas tended to the younger ones. Lena found herself washing dishes alongside Ruthie, their hands moving in companionable silence. "Pa says you came for Mr. Reddick," Ruthie said eventually, her voice carefully neutral. "Yes. I'm sorry it didn't work out." Lena glanced at the girl. Ruthie's face was closed, guarded, the face of someone who'd learned early to protect herself from disappointment. "So am I," Lena admitted. Ruthie was quiet for a moment, scrubbing at a stubborn spot on a bowl. "Are you going to stay? Or leave when the rain stops?" It was the question Lena had been avoiding all evening. She didn't have an answer, didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or the day after, or the day after that. "I don't know," she said honestly. Ruthie nodded, like this was the answer she'd expected. "Well, if you do stay, even just for a little while, it's nice having another woman around, just so you know." It was said so softly, so carefully, that Lena almost missed the longing underneath. This girl, barely 15, carrying the weight of a household on her shoulders, trying to be mother to her siblings, trying to be strong, trying to fill an impossible void. "It's nice being here," Lena said. "Just so you know." Ruthie's lips curved in the smallest of smiles before she ducked her head, focusing on the dishes again. By the time the kitchen was clean, the younger children were yawning. Jonas herded them upstairs to the loft, their voices drifting down through the ceiling, protests about bedtime, requests for stories, the shuffle of small feet. Lena stood by the fire, warming her hands, listening to the sounds of a family settling in for the night. It was foreign and familiar all at once, like a dream she'd had long ago and forgotten. Jonas came back downstairs, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his hair slightly disheveled from wrestling children into bed. "They'll be asleep in 10 minutes, he said. "The little ones, anyway. The older boys think they're going to read by candlelight, but they never make it past a page or two." "You have a beautiful family," Lena said. Jonas looked at her, something soft in his expression. "Thank you. They're good kids. A handful, but good." An awkward silence fell. Lena knew she should say something, should offer to leave in the morning, should thank him profusely for his hospitality, should explain herself, her situation, her plans. But she had no plans, no explanations that didn't sound pathetic, nothing to offer but gratitude that felt inadequate in the face of such unexpected kindness. "Mr. Hale," she began. "Jonas," he corrected gently. "Jonas, I don't know how to thank you for what you did today. You didn't have to help me. You didn't even have to stop. But you did. And her voice cracked. She swallowed hard, tried again. "I want you to know that I won't be a burden. I'll leave as soon as I can figure out where to go. I just need a day or two to—" "Miss Crowell," Jonas held up a hand, stopping her. "You're not a burden, and you don't need to leave unless you want to. Stay as long as you need. Help out around here if it makes you feel better about it, but there's no debt to repay. Understood?" Lena stared at him, searching his face for the catch, the hidden expectation, the thing he wasn't saying. She found nothing but sincerity. "I don't understand why you're being so kind to me." Jonas was quiet for a long moment, his gaze turning to the fire. 3 years ago, when my wife died, I was lost. Didn't know how I was going to raise 9 kids on my own, keep the farm running, keep everyone fed and clothed and safe. Felt like I was drowning. He paused, his jaw working. The community showed up. Neighbors I barely knew brought food, helped with chores, watched the kids so I could get things done. They didn't ask for anything in return. They just helped because it was the right thing to do. He looked back at Lena. "I learned something that year. Sometimes people need help, and sometimes you're the one who can give it. Doesn't have to be more complicated than that." Tears pricked Lena's eyes again. She was so tired of crying, but she couldn't seem to stop. "You've been hurt," Jonas continued, his voice gentle. "I don't know the details, and you don't have to tell me. But I know what it looks like when someone's been kicked while they're down, and I won't do that to you, not ever." Lena nodded, not trusting her voice. Jonas moved toward the stairs, paused with his foot on the bottom step. "Get some rest, Miss Crowell. Tomorrow will look better. It always does." He disappeared up the ladder, leaving Lena alone with the crackling fire and the warm, solid walls of a home that wasn't hers but had offered her shelter anyway. She returned to the small back room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. The quilt beneath her hands was worn, patched in places, but clean and soft. The window showed nothing but darkness and rain. Lena lay down, pulled the quilt over herself, and stared at the ceiling. This morning, God, was it only this morning? She had been full of hope. Nervous, yes, but hopeful. Ready to start a new life with a man she'd never met but had learned to trust through careful, thoughtful letters. That hope had been crushed within minutes of her arrival, crushed so thoroughly that she genuinely believed it was over, that she was done. And yet here she was, in a stranger's home, surrounded by a family that wasn't hers, being offered kindness she hadn't earned and didn't deserve. It didn't make sense. But maybe, Lena thought as exhaustion finally pulled her under, maybe it didn't have to make sense. Maybe, just for tonight, it was enough that she was warm and safe and not alone. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away the mud and the tears and the shattered pieces of the day. And inside, in a tiny room at the back of a mountain cabin, Lena Crowell closed her eyes and let herself hope, just a little, that tomorrow might bring something other than more heartbreak. Lena woke to the sound of children arguing. For a moment she lay disoriented in the unfamiliar bed, staring at rough wooden beams overhead that weren't hers, wrapped in a quilt that smelled of lavender and wood smoke. Then memory crashed back. The rejection, the rain, Jonas Hale and his 9 children appearing like something out of a fever dream. She sat up slowly, every muscle protesting. The borrowed dress was twisted around her legs and her hair hung in tangled waves down her back. Through the small window, pale morning light filtered through dissipating clouds. The storm had passed. The arguing grew louder. "My turn to feed the chickens. You did it yesterday. Pa said we're supposed to take turns." "That's because you were sick last week and I had to do your chores and mine." Lena rose, smoothed down her dress as best she could, and opened the door. The main room was already alive with activity. Jonas stood at the stove, flipping flapjacks with practiced efficiency while simultaneously settling a dispute between the twins. Ruthie was braiding Rose's hair. Samuel was trying to convince his father he was old enough to take the wagon to town alone. The baby, Eliza, banged a wooden spoon against her high chair with rhythmic determination. No one noticed Lena at first. She stood in the doorway watching this choreographed chaos with something like awe. In her old life, in her marriage to Daniel, mornings had been silent, tense affairs. Her husband reading his newspaper, her moving quietly so as not to disturb him, both of them existing in the same space without really touching. This was different. This was noise and life and energy bouncing off every wall. "Miss Crowell!" Esther spotted her first, waving enthusiastically from her seat at the table. "You're awake. Pa made flapjacks. Do you like flapjacks? I like them best with honey, but Jacob likes molasses, and—" "Esther, breathe," Ruthie said mildly, tying off Rose's braid. Jonas turned from the stove, a slight smile playing at his lips. "Morning. Hope the noise didn't wake you too early." "No, Lena realized with a start that she'd slept through the entire night. No waking in the dark, no lying awake replaying her failures, no tears soaking her pillow, just deep, dreamless sleep. "I slept well, thank you." "Good. You looked like you needed it." He gestured to the table with his spatula. "Sit. Breakfast is almost ready." Lena moved to take the same seat as last night between Maggie and Esther. The little girl immediately scooted closer, chattering about the tadpoles she'd found in the creek, and could she keep them as pets, and would they turn into frogs if she waited long enough? "Yes, they'll turn into frogs," Lena answered, feeling steadier on this safe ground of simple questions. "But they need water, lots of it, and special food." Esther's eyes went wide. "What kind of special food?" "Algae, mostly, and tiny insects." "We have lots of insects." Esther bounced in her seat. "Jacob found a beetle yesterday that was this big." She spread her hands improbably wide. "It was not that big." Jacob protested from across the table. It was just a regular beetle. Was too that big. Tell her, Maggie. Maggie, who'd been quietly eating her breakfast, looked up with the long-suffering expression of a middle child. It was a normal-sized beetle, Esther. You're exaggerating again. Jonas set a plate in front of Lena. 3 golden flapjacks, a pat of butter melting on top, honey drizzled over everything. The smell alone made her stomach rumble. Thank you, she said. He nodded, already moving to serve the next child. Lena watched him work. The easy way he moved between stove and table, how he knew without asking that Daniel liked his flapjacks cut into squares and David preferred his whole. How he automatically gave Ruthie an extra because she never took enough for herself. This was a man who knew his children, who paid attention. Lena ate slowly, savoring each bite. Around her, breakfast continued in its chaotic rhythm. Samuel reminded his father about the fence that needed mending in the north pasture. Ruthie mentioned they were running low on flour and sugar. The twins argued about whose turn it was to collect eggs until Jonas settled it with the patience of Solomon. After breakfast, Jonas announced, raising his voice to be heard over the din, Samuel and I will work on the fence. Ruthie, you're in charge of the little ones. Maggie, I need you to weed the vegetable garden. Twins, you're on firewood duty, and I mean actual work, not building elaborate forts in the woodpile. But Pa, Daniel started. No forts. Not today. We need that wood stacked properly before the next rain. The boys subsided into grumbling but didn't argue further. Jonas's gaze landed on Lena. Miss Crowell, you're welcome to rest today. Get your bearings. Or if you'd rather keep busy, I'm sure Ruthie could use an extra pair of hands with the children. I'd like to help, Lena said immediately. The thought of sitting alone in that small room with nothing to do but think about her situation was unbearable. Whatever you need. Something approving flickered in Jonas's eyes. Ruthie? The girl looked up from cutting Rose's flapjacks into small bites. The washing needs doing, and Rose needs a bath. She got into the mud yesterday, and someone should probably check on the chickens because I heard them making a fuss earlier. I can do all of that, Lena offered. Ruthie's expression was carefully neutral, but Lena saw the relief underneath. This girl carried too much, too young. After breakfast, the family scattered to their various tasks. Jonas and Samuel headed out with tools and determined expressions. The twins trudged toward the woodpile with exaggerated reluctance. Maggie gathered her gardening supplies, and Ruthie herded the younger children, Esther, Jacob, Rose, and baby Eliza, into something resembling order. The washtub is out back, Ruthie told Lena. I already drew water this morning, but it'll need heating, and Rose... She turned to the 3-year-old who was already trying to escape toward the door. You need a bath, little miss. No arguments. Rose's lower lip jutted out. Don't want a bath. You're covered in mud from yesterday. You need a bath. No! Lena knelt down to Rose's level, remembering the tricks she'd learned with her nieces and nephews during those awkward years of being passed between relatives. What if we make it fun? We could use that nice soap that smells like flowers. And afterward you can help me feed the chickens. Rose considered this, her small face serious. The chickens are scary. They're only scary if you're scared of them, but if you're brave, they're actually quite nice. I'm brave, Rose declared, puffing out her chest. Then a brave girl shouldn't be afraid of a little bath, should she? Rose thought about this logic for a long moment, then sighed dramatically. Okay, but I want the flower soap. Deal. Ruthie stared at Lena with something like wonder. How did you... She never agrees that easily. Lena smiled. I had practice with stubborn children a long time ago. She didn't elaborate, and Ruthie didn't press. Instead, the girl showed Lena where everything was kept. The soap, the towels, the clean clothes for Rose. Then she disappeared with the other children, leaving Lena to manage the bath time battle alone. Except it wasn't a battle. Rose, true to her word, submitted to the bath with minimal fussing. Lena heated water, filled the small tub, and gently scrubbed away layers of dirt while Rose played with a wooden duck and talked nonsense about her imaginary friend who lived in the barn. His name is Mr. Whiskers, but he's not a cat, Rose explained seriously. He's a horse, a very small horse. I see. And does Mr. Whiskers like living in the barn? Yes, but he gets lonely sometimes. That's why I visit him. Lena's throat tightened. This little girl, who'd lost her mother so young had created a friend to keep her company in her loneliness. It was heartbreaking and resilient all at once. "Well, I'm sure Mr. Whiskers is very grateful for your visits," Lena said softly. After the bath, Lena dressed Rose in clean clothes and braided her damp hair. The little girl submitted to this with surprising patience, occasionally reaching up to touch the braid taking shape. "You do it different than Ruthie," Rose observed. "Different bad or different good?" "Just different," Rose paused. "I like it." Something warm bloomed in Lena's chest. Such a small thing, a child's approval, but it felt enormous. They checked on the chickens next. Rose held Lena's hand tightly as they approached the coop, her earlier bravado wavering. But Lena showed her how to scatter the feed, how to speak softly so as not to startle the birds, how to check for eggs in the nesting boxes. "Look!" Rose held up an egg with both hands, her face glowing. "I found one." "You did? Very good. Let's see if there are more." They found 6 eggs total, which Rose insisted on carrying back to the house herself, walking with exaggerated care so as not to break them. Ruthie met them at the door, Eliza balanced on her hip. "How did it go?" "Rose was very brave with the chickens," Lena reported. "And we found 6 eggs." Rose beamed with pride. "That's wonderful." Ruthie shifted Eliza higher. "Esther and Jacob are supposed to be reading their lessons, but I think they're actually building something with blocks. Would you mind checking on them while I get Eliza down for her nap?" "Of course." Lena found the children in the main room, surrounded by wooden blocks and open books they were clearly ignoring. They looked up guiltily when she entered. "We were just taking a break," Esther said quickly. "A very short break," Jacob added. Lena hid a smile. "What are you supposed to be reading?" Esther held up a primer. "Words. Boring words." "All words are boring when you're forced to read them," Lena agreed, settling into a chair nearby. "But some words tell stories, and stories are never boring." "The book doesn't have stories," Jacob said glumly. "Just the cat sat on the mat and stuff like that." "Well, that's because you're supposed to use those words to make your own stories." Lena leaned forward conspiratorially. "For instance, why did the cat sit on the mat?" Esther blinked. "Because that's what cats do?" "Maybe. Or maybe the cat was guarding a secret treasure hidden under the mat. Or maybe the mat was actually a magic carpet, and the cat was waiting for midnight when it would fly away to distant lands." Both children's eyes went wide. "Could we write that?" Esther asked. "Like a real story?" "Why not? You know the words. Now you just have to put them together in a way that's interesting." For the next hour, Lena helped the children craft elaborate stories using their simple vocabulary words. The cat on the mat became an adventurer. The dog that ran became a hero rescuing a lost child. The sun that shone became a magical source of power for a kingdom in trouble. The children were so engrossed they didn't notice Ruthie returning until she spoke. "I've never seen them so focused on lessons," she said, wonder in her voice. Lena looked up. "They're bright children. They just needed to see that learning could be fun." "Ma used to make games out of lessons," Ruthie said quietly. "I'd forgotten that. We've just been getting through things since she died, not making them enjoyable." "Getting through is sometimes all you can manage," Lena said gently. "But maybe now there's room for a bit more." Ruthie's eyes shone suspiciously bright. She blinked rapidly, cleared her throat. "I should start on the washing. Would you like to help, or you could stay here with the children?" "I'll help with the washing. These two can practice writing their stories." Outside, the morning had turned beautiful. The storm-washed sky was a brilliant blue, and the air smelled of wet earth and pine. Lena and Ruthie worked side by side at the washtub, scrubbing clothes against the washboard in companionable silence. "Can I ask you something?" Ruthie said eventually. "Of course." "Why did you come all the way out here?" "For Mr. Reddick, I mean." The girl kept her eyes on the shirt she was scrubbing. "It's just, you seem nice and smart. I would think you could have found someone closer to wherever you came from." Lena was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "I was married before. It didn't end well. After the divorce, I became inconvenient. My family didn't know what to do with me. I was passed from house to house, always temporary, never quite belonging anywhere. She wrung out a pillowcase, watching water stream between her fingers. Mr. Reddick's letters made me think I could belong somewhere, that I could build a new life, a real life, away from people who knew my past and judged me for it. I thought, her voice caught. I thought maybe I could start over. I'm sorry he was cruel to you, Ruthie said fiercely. Everyone in town knows he's mean-spirited. He goes through hired hands like other people go through firewood because no one can stand working for him. I don't know why he even bothered looking for a wife. He wanted children, Lena said simply, and I can't give him that. Ruthie's hands stilled in the water. Is that what he told you? That you weren't good enough because you can't have babies? Yes. Ruthie's jaw clenched. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. There's more to being a woman than having babies. There's more to being a wife than that. The conviction in her voice made Lena's throat tight. Thank you for saying that. I'm not just saying it, I mean it. Ruthie attacked the washing with renewed vigor. My ma, she had all of us, obviously, but that's not what made her special. What made her special was how she loved us, how she made everything feel safe and warm, how she could fix anything with a song and a hug, how she knew exactly what each of us needed without us having to say it. Tears spilled down Ruthie's cheeks, though her hands never stopped working. And when she died, I tried to be that for everyone. I tried to be what she was. But I'm not her. I'm 15 years old and I'm tired all the time. And some days I want to scream because it's too much and I don't know how to do it all. And her voice broke. Lena immediately pulled the girl into her arms, holding her while she sobbed against her shoulder. Ruthie clung to her like a drowning person, and Lena's heart shattered for this child carrying a woman's burden. You're not supposed to do it all, Lena murmured. You're allowed to be 15. You're allowed to be tired. You're allowed to need help. But Pa needs me. The kids need me. I can't. Needing help doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're human. Lena pulled back just enough to look Ruthie in the eyes. Your father is a good man. He wouldn't want you carrying all of this alone. I know, but he's already carrying so much himself, the farm, the children, everything. I can't add to that. Oh, sweetheart. Lena tucked a strand of hair behind Ruthie's ear. You're not a burden to him. You're his daughter. And daughters aren't supposed to sacrifice themselves to make things easier for everyone else. Ruthie wiped her eyes roughly. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm telling you all this. You're a guest, and I shouldn't. I'm glad you told me, and for what it's worth, I think you're doing an incredible job. But you don't have to do it alone anymore. Not while I'm here. Something cautiously hopeful flickered across Ruthie's face. How long will you be here? It was the same question Ruthie had asked last night, and Lena still didn't have an answer. She didn't know what came next, didn't know where she would go or what she would do. The future stretched ahead like unmapped territory. But looking at this girl, this brave, exhausted, fierce girl who'd opened up to her, Lena felt something shift inside her chest. I don't know, she admitted. But for as long as I am here, you can count on me, all right? Ruthie nodded, sniffling. Then she straightened her shoulders, wiped her face one last time, and returned to the washing. We should finish this before lunch. Pa and Samuel will be back soon, and they'll be hungry. They worked in silence after that, but it was different now. Easier, like something had been acknowledged and accepted between them. By the time Jonas and Samuel returned, the washing was done and hanging on lines strung between trees. Lena had also managed to put together a simple lunch, leftover biscuits, cold ham, cheese, and fresh radishes from the garden that Maggie had harvested. Jonas surveyed the spread, then looked at Lena with raised eyebrows. You didn't have to do all this. I wanted to help. You said so yourself. I said you were welcome to rest. I've had enough rest. It was true. After months of being shuffled between relatives, of being made to feel like an imposition in every house she entered, it felt good to be useful, to contribute, to matter. The family gathered for lunch, and Lena found herself relaxing into the rhythm of it. The teasing between siblings, the way Jonas mediated disputes with quiet authority, the little ones vying for attention. It was messy and loud and imperfect. It was wonderful. Miss Crowell helped us write stories, Esther announced around a mouthful of biscuit. I wrote about a magic cat. And I wrote about a hero dog, Jacob added. Did you now? Jonas looked at Lena with interest. That's quite an accomplishment. They did all the work, Lena demurred. I just helped them see that they could. She made learning fun, Ruthie said, like Ma used to. A hush fell over the table. The children exchanged glances. Jonas went very still. Ruthie's eyes widened. I wasn't trying to say. It's all right. Jonas's voice was gentle. It's good to remember your Ma, to remember how she did things. That's not something to apologize for. He looked at Lena then, and there was something in his expression she couldn't quite name. Gratitude, maybe, or recognition. Thank you, he said simply, for helping today. It was my pleasure. After lunch, Jonas returned to his work, taking Samuel with him. The afternoon stretched ahead, filled with the endless small tasks that kept a household running. Lena threw herself into them, mending torn clothes, sweeping floors, helping Maggie in the garden, playing quiet games with the little ones, while Ruthie finally had a moment to herself. As the sun began its descent toward the mountains, Lena found herself in the garden, pulling weeds alongside Maggie. The girl worked with methodical precision, her small hands efficient and sure. Do you miss your old home? Maggie asked suddenly. Lena considered the question. Parts of it. I miss the familiarity, knowing where everything was, having a routine. But not the people? No, Lena admitted. Not most of them. Maggie was quiet for a moment, uprooting a stubborn dandelion. People used to look at us different after Ma died, like we were broken, like they felt sorry for us but didn't really want to get too close. That must have been hard. It was. Still is sometimes. Maggie sat back on her heels, squinting against the lowering sun. But Pa says feeling sorry for someone and actually helping them are two different things. Most people feel sorry. Not many people help. Your father is a wise man. He tries. Maggie returned to weeding. He makes mistakes sometimes, gets tired, gets sad. But he never gives up on us, never makes us feel like we're too much trouble. Unlike your family, Lena heard in the unspoken words. Unlike the people who made you feel like a burden. You're lucky to have him, Lena said. I know. Maggie pulled another weed. Are you going to stay? It was becoming a refrain, everyone asking, no one quite believing she might. Would you like me to? Maggie shrugged with the studied nonchalance of an 11-year-old trying not to show she cared. It's nice having you here. You make Ruthie smile more. And Esther hasn't talked about missing Ma at bedtime since you came. Lena's chest tightened. That's only been 2 nights. Still, Maggie glanced at her sideways. You're different from the women who come to church and pat our heads and tell Pa they're praying for us. You actually do things. You notice things. Like what? Like how Jacob is left-handed but keeps trying to write with his right hand because that's how everyone else does it. Or how Rose only acts brave when she's scared. Or how Ruthie pretends she's fine when she's about to break. Maggie's voice dropped. You see us. Really see us. That doesn't happen much. Lena had to look away, blinking against sudden tears. She hadn't realized how much she'd been seeing, how closely she'd been paying attention. It had been instinctive, natural, the same way she used to watch her nieces and nephews, learning their quirks and fears and secret joys. Maybe this was what she'd been made for. Not bearing children, but nurturing them. Not creating life, but enriching the lives already here. Thank you for telling me that, Lena managed. They finished the weeding in comfortable silence as the sky turned gold and pink. When they returned to the house, arms full of vegetables, they found Jonas at the stove again, this time making some kind of soup. The little ones were playing quietly, worn out from the day, while Ruthie set the table. Thought I'd handle supper tonight, Jonas said when he saw Lena's surprised expression. You've been working hard all day. You should rest before the evening chaos hits. I don't mind helping. I know you don't, but I'm telling you to sit. He pointed at a chair with his wooden spoon. Sit. Lena sat. From her vantage point, she watched Jonas cook. He moved with the same competence he brought to everything else, checking the soup, cutting bread, tasting and adjusting seasonings. This was a man who'd learned by necessity, not choice, who'd had to become both mother and father to his children when tragedy struck. And he'd done it. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not without struggle, but he'd done it. His children were fed, clothed, loved. The house was chaotic but functional. No one was neglected or overlooked. "You're staring," Jonas said without looking up from the pot. Lena startled. "I'm sorry, I was just thinking." "About?" "About how capable you are. How you've built a good life here, despite everything." Jonas was quiet for a moment. "Doesn't always feel good. Some days it feels like I'm barely keeping my head above water, like one more thing will sink us all." "But you keep swimming. What else can I do?" He finally looked at her and his eyes were tired, bone tired, soul tired. "They're counting on me. Can't let them down." "You won't," Lena said with absolute certainty. "You're not the kind of man who lets people down." Something shifted in Jonas's expression, surprise maybe, or recognition, like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. "Neither are you," he said quietly. "The kind of woman, I mean." The moment stretched between them, weighted with something Lena couldn't name. Then Eliza started fussing, and Ruthie swooped in to pick her up, and the spell broke. Supper was the same chaotic affair as breakfast and lunch, but this time Lena felt part of it instead of separate from it. She knew now that Daniel liked his food cut into squares, and David didn't. She knew Esther would try to feed half her vegetables to Rose under the table unless watched carefully. She knew Maggie ate in silence but listened to every conversation. She was learning them. And they were learning her. After supper, after dishes, after the children were bathed and read to and tucked into bed, Lena found herself alone with Jonas again. They sat by the fire, the house finally quiet, the weight of the day settling over them like a blanket. "Thank you for today," Jonas said, "for helping, for being patient with the children, for—" He paused, searching for words. "For fitting in so easily. That's rare." "They're easy to love," Lena said simply. Jonas studied her face in the firelight. "Reddick's a fool." "What?" "For turning you away. For making you think you weren't enough." His voice was fierce, protective. "He's a fool, and you're better off without him." Lena's throat went tight. "You don't know me well enough to say that." "Don't I? I've watched you for 2 days now. I've seen how you are with children, patient, creative, genuinely interested in them as people. I've seen you work without complaint, help without being asked, adapt to a strange household like you've always been part of it." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "So yes, I do know enough to say Thomas Reddick is a fool, and whatever he told you about your worth was a lie." Tears spilled down Lena's cheeks before she could stop them. "He said I was damaged goods, useless, that no man would want a barren woman. Then he's not a man. He's a coward, hiding behind cruel words." Jonas's jaw clenched. A real man sees worth beyond biology, sees the whole person, not just what they can provide. And any man worth his salt would be damn lucky to have you. The words broke something open inside Lena, some last desperate grip on the shame and worthlessness that had defined her for so long. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Jonas moved to sit beside her, close but not touching. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you cry." "You didn't. I mean, these are good tears, I think." Lena lowered her hands, tried to smile through the wetness. "No one's ever said anything like that to me before. Daniel certainly never did. He blamed me for everything, for not getting pregnant, for not being the wife he wanted, for disappointing him. And when he left, I believed him. I believed it was all my fault. It wasn't. I know that now. Logically, I know. But believing it here," she pressed a hand to her heart. "That's harder." "It takes time," Jonas said gently. "Healing always does." They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire burn down to embers. Lena felt wrung out but lighter somehow, like something poisonous had been lanced and drained away. "Can I ask you something?" she said eventually. "Anything." "Why did you stop? That first night, in the rain. You had 9 children with you. You were trying to get home before dark. You had every reason to just keep walking. Why did you stop for me?" Jonas was quiet for a long moment. "Because I saw myself 3 years ago. Lost, overwhelmed, not sure how to keep going. And I remembered how much it meant when people stopped. When they saw me struggling and chose to help instead of looking away. He glanced at her. I couldn't walk past you any more than I could have walked past my own reflection in a moment of need. I'm glad you stopped, Lena whispered. So am I. The fire popped, sending up a small shower of sparks. Upstairs, one of the children coughed in their sleep. The familiar sounds of the house settling for the night surrounded them. You know, Jonas said slowly, you're welcome to stay longer, much longer if you want. The children have taken to you and… He cleared his throat. It's nice having another adult around, someone who understands the work, who doesn't just visit and leave. Lena's heart raced. Jonas, I couldn't impose it. It's not an imposition if I'm asking. And I am asking, I mean. He met her eyes. Stay, Lena, not as a guest, as part of this household. Help with the children, the work, whatever you're comfortable with. In exchange, you'll have a home, a real home, not a temporary stop, for as long as you need it. I don't know what to say. Say yes, or say you'll think about it, but don't say no because you think you're being a burden, because you're not. You're… He paused, choosing his words carefully. You're making things better, already, in just 2 days. Lena looked around the cabin, at the toys scattered near the hearth, the coats hanging by the door, the table still bearing the marks of children's elbows and spilled milk. This wasn't her home. These weren't her children. This wasn't her life. But it could be. I'll stay, she heard herself say, for as long as you'll have me. Jonas's smile was like sunrise, slow, warm, transforming his entire face. Then welcome home, Lena Crowell. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Lena believed that maybe, just maybe, she had finally found where she belonged. 3 weeks passed like water flowing downstream, steady, natural, inevitable. Lena settled into the rhythm of the Hale household as if she'd always been part of it. She woke before dawn to start breakfast, spent her days teaching the children and managing the endless chores, and fell into bed each night with the bone-deep satisfaction of having been useful, needed, wanted. The children stopped calling her Miss Crowell and started calling her Miss Lena. Small hands reached for hers without hesitation. Esther climbed into her lap during evening story time. Even Ruthie, cautious Ruthie, began to relax, to trust that Lena wasn't going to disappear like morning mist. Jonas worked from dawn to dusk, managing the farm with quiet competence. But Lena noticed things, how he smiled more easily now, how the tension in his shoulders eased when he came home to find supper ready and children happy, how sometimes when their eyes met across the table, something warm and unspoken passed between them. It was a good life, a peaceful life. Too good, maybe. Too peaceful. Lena should have known it couldn't last. The trouble started on a Saturday when Jonas took Lena and the older children into Millbrook for supplies. The town was small, a general store, a church, a handful of other buildings clustered around a dusty main street. People moved with the unhurried pace of those who had nowhere more important to be. Jonas helped Lena down from the wagon, his hand steady at her elbow. Store's just there. I need to stop by the blacksmith, but Ruthie and Samuel can help you get what we need. All right. Lena smoothed down her skirts. Another borrowed dress of Jonas's late wife, altered to fit her frame. She'd protested at first, but Jonas had insisted. Can't have you wearing the same dress every day, he'd said. Sarah would want them used, not gathering dust. They entered the general store together, the bell above the door announcing their arrival. The proprietor, a round-faced man named Mr. Hutchins, looked up from his ledger and smiled. Morning, Jonas, and Miss… He faltered, clearly unsure what to call Lena. Miss Crowell, Jonas supplied. She's helping with the children. Ah, Mr. Hutchins' smile widened. Well, that's wonderful. Lord knows you needed an extra pair of hands out there. They gathered their supplies, flour, sugar, salt, fabric for new shirts for the boys who were growing like weeds. Lena was examining a bolt of blue calico when she heard the door open behind her. Well, well, if it isn't the woman Thomas Reddick threw back. The voice was female, sharp-edged with false sweetness. Lena turned to find a woman in her late 30s, dressed in clothes a shade too fine for a Saturday morning in Millbrook. Her hair was elaborately curled, her lips painted red, and her eyes held the calculating gleam of someone who trafficked in other people's misfortunes. "Mrs. Talbot," Mr. Hutchins said, his friendly tone noticeably cooler. "What can I do for you?" "Oh, I'm just looking." Mrs. Talbot's gaze never left Lena. "But I couldn't help noticing Jonas Hale's wagon outside. And here I find you, Miss Crowell, playing house with a widower and his brood." Lena's spine stiffened. "I'm helping Mr. Hale with his children. There's nothing improper about it." "Oh, I'm sure there isn't." Mrs. Talbot's smile was all teeth. "After all, what impropriety could there be in a divorced woman living alone with a man? Why, it's practically a church social." Heat flooded Lena's face. Across the store, she saw Ruthie and Samuel freeze, their eyes wide. "That's enough, Constance," Mr. Hutchins said sharply. "Miss Crowell is a customer, and I'll thank you to speak civilly in my store." "I'm only stating facts, Herbert, facts that the whole town will be discussing soon enough." Mrs. Talbot examined her gloves with exaggerated interest. "After all, it's quite the coincidence, isn't it? A desperate woman shows up claiming Thomas rejected her, and next thing we know, she's installed herself in another man's home. One has to wonder about opportunism of it all." "You don't know what you're talking about," Lena said, her voice shaking with suppressed anger. "Don't I? Thomas told everyone at church about the Barren woman who tried to trick him into marriage. Said you lied about your whole situation, made him believe you were something you weren't." Mrs. Talbot's eyes glittered. "And now here you are, latching on to the first lonely widower you could find. Tell me, Miss Crowell, does Jonas know about your little deficiency, or are you keeping that secret too?" The words hit like physical blows. Lena couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the roaring in her ears. "Jonas knows everything," Ruthie said suddenly, stepping forward. Her young face was flushed with fury. "And he doesn't care about your nasty gossip, Mrs. Talbot. None of us do." "Oh, sweetheart." Mrs. Talbot's tone dripped with condescension. "You're too young to understand. But mark my words, this woman is using your father. And when she's gotten what she wants, she'll move on to the next fool willing to take her in." "That's a lie." Samuel's hands were clenched into fists. "Miss Lena isn't like that." "Samuel, Ruthie." Lena reached for them, trying to calm the situation before it escalated further. The door banged open. Jonas strode in, taking in the scene with sharp eyes. "What's going on here?" "Jonas!" Mrs. Talbot's expression shifted to something resembling sympathy. "I was just expressing my concerns about your arrangement. As a friend, you understand. People are talking, and I thought you should know." "Let them talk." Jonas's voice was cold, flat. "What happens in my household is none of their concern. Or yours." "But Jonas, think of your children. What kind of example are you setting, taking in a woman of questionable character? A divorced woman, no less, who—" "Constance." The single word cut through her speech like a blade. "I'm going to say this once, and I suggest you listen carefully. Lena Crowell is a guest in my home, helping care for my children. There is nothing improper, nothing shameful, and nothing anyone needs to concern themselves with. If you have a problem with that, you can take it up with Reverend Matthews. I'm sure he'll be interested to hear about you spreading malicious gossip about a woman you don't even know." Mrs. Talbot's face mottled red. "Well, I was only trying to help." "You weren't. You were trying to cause trouble because that's what you do." Jonas stepped closer to Lena, a subtle but unmistakable positioning. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have shopping to finish." He turned his back on Mrs. Talbot, a deliberate dismissal, and began gathering the supplies. "Ruthie, Samuel, help Miss Lena load these things. We're leaving." They worked in tense silence while Mrs. Talbot stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. Finally, she spun on her heel and marched out, the door slamming behind her. Mr. Hutchins exhaled heavily. "I'm sorry about that, Jonas. Constance has always been a vicious gossip who makes herself feel important by tearing others down," Jonas finished. "I know. It's not your fault, Herbert." They loaded their purchases quickly. Lena's hands shook as she carried packages to the wagon, mortification burning through her veins. She'd brought this on Jonas, on his children. Her presence, her past, her failures, they were poisoning the peace he'd built. The ride home was silent. The children sensed the adults' moods and stayed quiet, even the little ones subdued. Lena stared at her hands, shame coiling in her stomach like a snake. When they reached the cabin, Jonas unhitched the horses while the children scattered to their chores. Lena moved to help unload supplies, but Jonas caught her arm gently. "Leave it. We need to talk." Dread filled her chest. "Jonas, I'm so sorry. I never meant to bring trouble to your door. If I'd known that woman would—" "This isn't about Constance Talbot." Jonas guided her to the porch steps, and they sat side by side. "This is about you thinking you're responsible for other people's cruelty." But she was right about some things. People will talk. About me living here, about my past, about— Let them talk. Jonas's voice was firm. "Lena, look at me." She raised her eyes to his. "I don't care what Constance Talbot thinks. I don't care what the whole town thinks. What matters is what's true. And the truth is that you've been a blessing to this family. The children adore you. The house runs smoother. Everyone's happier. Those are facts. Everything else is just noise." "But what about your reputation? The children's reputation? If people think there's something improper, then they're fools." Jonas's jaw set stubbornly. "There's nothing improper about helping each other. Nothing shameful about providing shelter to someone who needs it. And anyone who suggests otherwise can answer to me." Lena wanted to believe him, wanted to accept his words and let go of the shame eating at her. But she'd lived too long with judgment, with whispered condemnation, with being made to feel like her very existence was an imposition. "What did she mean about Thomas telling everyone?" Lena asked quietly. "About me being barren? About lying to him?" Jonas's expression darkened. "He's been running his mouth at church, telling anyone who'll listen about the deceitful woman who tried to trap him into marriage, making himself out to be the victim. Maybe he is. Maybe I should have told him. Don't." Jonas's hand covered hers, warm and solid. "Don't you dare take on his shame. Whatever Thomas Reddick told people, whatever lies he's spreading, that's on him, not you." "But, Lena." Jonas waited until she met his eyes again. "There's something you should know, something I found out this week when I was in town talking to Doc Morrison." A chill ran down Lena's spine. "What?" "Thomas Reddick can't have children. Never could. Doc Morrison treated him years ago for an infection that left him sterile. The whole story about you being barren, about that being why he rejected you, it was all projection. He blamed you for his own inadequacy." The world tilted. Lena gripped the porch railing, her breath coming in short gasps. "What?" "He lied, Lena. He rejected you and publicly humiliated you to cover up his own shame. You weren't the problem. You never were." The information crashed over her like a wave, drowning out thought. All those years of believing Daniel when he said she was broken, all the shame, the guilt, the certainty that something fundamental was wrong with her. And now this. The man who'd confirmed her worst fears about herself had been lying the whole time. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would he do that? Why bring me all the way here just to—" "Because men like Thomas Reddick need someone to blame for their failures," Jonas said quietly. "He probably did want a wife, someone to cook and clean and tend his house. But when he realized people might eventually figure out he couldn't father children, he needed a scapegoat. You were convenient." Rage bloomed in Lena's chest, hot and purifying. "He destroyed me, made me believe I was worthless, made the whole town think I was a liar and a fraud. And it was all to protect himself?" "Yes." Lena stood abruptly, pacing the porch. Her mind raced, piecing together the cruelty of it. Thomas's careful questions in his letters, fishing for information he could use. His cousin Margaret's betrayal, sharing Lena's private struggles. The calculated humiliation in front of Cyrus, ensuring there would be a witness to spread the story. It had all been planned, deliberate, malicious. "I want to confront him," she said. "I want to march over there and tell him exactly what I think of him and his lies." "I understand that, but confronting him won't change anything. He'll just deny it or twist it around somehow." "Then what am I supposed to do? Just let him keep spreading lies about me?" Jonas was quiet for a moment. "We could talk to Reverend Matthews, explain the situation. The Reverend has influence in this community. If he knows the truth, and what good will that do, Mrs.? Talbot was right about one thing. People love gossip more than truth. Even if the Reverend believes me, half the town won't. Maybe not at first, but truth has a way of winning out eventually. Lena wanted to believe that, wanted to think justice and truth mattered more than lies and gossip, but experience had taught her otherwise. Before she could respond, Ruthie appeared in the doorway. "Pa, Miss Lena, there's someone coming up the road." Jonas stood, his expression shifting to something wary. "Expecting anyone?" "No." They moved to the yard as a horse and rider came into view. The man was middle-aged, dressed in a fine suit that marked him as someone from the city, not a local farmer. He dismounted with practiced ease, tying his horse to the fence post. "Mr. Hale." His accent was refined, educated. "My name is Reed Mercer. I'm looking for a woman named Lena Crowell. I was told she might be here." Every muscle in Lena's body turned to ice. Reed Mercer. The name from her nightmares, the man she'd spent 2 years running from. Jonas must have seen something in her face because he stepped slightly in front of her, a subtle but protective gesture. "Who's asking?" Reed's smile was pleasant, practiced. "I'm a business associate of Miss Crowell's late husband. I heard she was in the area and wanted to pay my respects, see how she's faring." It was a lie. Every word a lie wrapped in civilized courtesy. "I'm faring well, Mr. Mercer," Lena said, forcing her voice steady. "Thank you for your concern. Now, if you'll excuse us, surely you can spare a few moments for an old friend." Reed's eyes, cold, calculating eyes that had never held anything resembling friendship, fixed on her. "It's been so long, Lena. I've been worried about you. I don't recall us being friends." Lena's hands were shaking. She clasped them behind her back so he wouldn't see. Now, no need to be hostile. I simply want to talk." Reed glanced at Jonas. "Perhaps somewhere private?" "Anything you have to say can be said right here," Jonas said flatly. Reed's pleasant expression flickered, revealing something harder underneath. "Mr. Hale, I appreciate your hospitality to Miss Crowell, but this is a private matter, between old acquaintances. She's not going anywhere with you. I wasn't aware Miss Crowell needed a keeper." Reed's tone sharpened. "Or has she misrepresented her situation to you as well? It seems to be a pattern with her." "You need to leave," Jonas said. "Now." Reed made no move toward his horse. Instead, he looked past Jonas to Lena, his gaze invasive, possessive. "You can't run forever, Lena. Sooner or later, we need to settle accounts. The money you took—" "I didn't take anything that wasn't owed to me." The words burst out before Lena could stop them. "Daniel left me with nothing. Nothing. Those items I sold were mine, gifts from my family, and I had every right." "That's not how Daniel's family sees it. They consider those heirlooms stolen property." Reed's smile was cold. "Of course, we could settle this quietly, if you were reasonable." The threat hung in the air, barely veiled. Jonas moved fully between them. "I think I've heard enough. You've got 10 seconds to get on that horse before I help you onto it. And trust me, you won't like my methods." For a long moment, Reed didn't move. Then he smiled, a slow, dangerous smile that made Lena's skin crawl. "Very well. I can see this isn't the time for reasonable discussion." He mounted his horse with deliberate slowness. "But this conversation isn't over, Lena. We will talk, soon." He rode away, and Lena felt her knees buckle. Jonas caught her, steadying her as she struggled to breathe. "Who was that?" Jonas's voice was tight with suppressed anger. "Daniel's business partner. At least, that's what he claimed to be." Lena's voice shook. "He was always around during our marriage, always finding excuses to visit, to talk to me alone. Daniel encouraged it, said Reed was a valuable connection. But I knew there was something wrong about him." "Did he hurt you?" "Not physically, but he watched me, made comments about what I wore, how I looked, where I went. After Daniel left, Reed started showing up at my family's houses, offering to help me, suggesting I could stay with him, that he'd take care of me if I was grateful." The words tasted like ash. "When I refused, he got angry, started making accusations, claiming I'd stolen from Daniel, that I owed the family money. It was all lies, but he had lawyers, resources. I had nothing." "So you ran?" "Yes. I liquidated what little I had left and came west. I thought I thought I was far enough away that he couldn't find me. Jonas's jaw clenched. He followed you here, all this way. It's not about me. It's about control. Reed Mercer doesn't like it when people defy him. Lena wrapped her arms around herself. I should leave before he brings real trouble to your door. Absolutely not. Jonas, you don't understand. Reed is dangerous, not in an obvious way, but he has connections, money, power. He can make life very difficult for people who cross him. Then he'll find I'm not as easy to intimidate as he thinks. Jonas's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. You're not facing this alone, Lena. Not anymore. You can't fight this for me. Watch me. Before Lena could argue further, Ruthie called from the house. Pa! Miss Lena! Reverend Matthews is here. Jonas and Lena exchanged glances. Did you send for him? Lena asked. No. They returned to the front of the house to find a kindly-faced man in his 60s climbing down from a buggy. Reverend Matthews had snow-white hair, gentle eyes, and the bearing of someone who'd spent a lifetime mediating the troubles of his flock. Jonas, Miss Crowell. He nodded to each of them. I hope I'm not intruding, but I thought it best to speak with you both sooner rather than later. About what? Jonas asked, though from his expression he already knew. I had a visit from Constance Talbot this afternoon, and then, interestingly, from Thomas Reddick. They had quite a lot to say about your household arrangements. The Reverend's tone was mild, but his eyes were sharp. I thought it best to hear your side directly rather than rely on second-hand accounts. Lena's heart sank. Here it was. The judgment she'd been dreading, the condemnation that would force her to leave this family she'd come to love. There's nothing improper happening here, Jonas said firmly. Miss Crowell helps with the children in exchange for room and board. That's the extent of it. I'm not questioning your integrity, Jonas. I know you well enough to trust your word. Reverend Matthews glanced at Lena. But I'm afraid others are not so charitable. And perception, fair or not, matters in a small community. What are you suggesting? Lena asked quietly. The Reverend sighed. I'm suggesting that your current arrangement, however innocent, is providing fodder for gossip. And gossip, left unchecked, can poison a community and damage reputations irreparably, especially for your children, Jonas. So what? Jonas's voice hardened. I'm supposed to turn away someone who needs help because people might talk? That doesn't sound very Christian to me, Reverend. I'm not suggesting you turn her away. I'm suggesting you consider making the arrangement more official. Silence fell over the yard. Official how? Jonas asked slowly. Reverend Matthews looked between them. Marriage, Jonas. It would silence the gossips and provide Miss Crowell with proper security. And from what I understand, your children have grown quite attached to her. Lena's breath caught. Marriage. To Jonas. The thought sent her heart racing with a confusing mixture of panic and something else. Something warm and terrifying. That's... Jonas cleared his throat. That's a significant step, Reverend. I understand. I'm not saying you need to decide today, but it's worth considering, given the circumstances. The Reverend's expression softened. I've seen how you are together, Jonas, at church last Sunday, watching you with the children. There's an ease there, a partnership. These things matter more than people realize. Reverend Matthews, Lena forced herself to speak, though her voice trembled. I appreciate your concern, but I won't trap Mr. Hale into a marriage of convenience just to silence gossips. He's been kind enough to help me. I won't repay that by forcing him into something he doesn't want. Does it look like I'm being forced? Jonas asked quietly. Lena turned to him, startled. What? The Reverend has a point. Marriage would solve several problems at once. You'd have legal protection from Reed Mercer and anyone else trying to cause you trouble. The children would have a mother figure who's already proven herself. And the gossips would have nothing left to gossip about. But you don't love me. You barely know me. Jonas's expression was unreadable. I know enough. And love, real love, is built over time, isn't it? Through shared work and trust and commitment. We already have the foundation. The rest could come. Jonas, I'm not proposing right now, he said quickly. I'm just saying the Reverend's suggestion isn't as crazy as it might sound. Will you at least think about it? Lena couldn't speak. couldn't process what was happening. 3 weeks ago, she'd been rejected and humiliated. Now a good man was calmly discussing marriage like it was a logical solution to a practical problem. "I should let you two talk," Reverend Matthews said gently. "But Lena, I want you to know, whatever Thomas Reddick has said about you, I don't believe it. I've seen you with Jonas's children. I've seen the light that's come back into this family. That tells me more about your character than any gossip ever could." He climbed back into his buggy and drove away, leaving Lena and Jonas standing in the yard, the weight of unspoken possibilities hanging between them. "You don't have to decide anything now," Jonas said. "But I meant what I said. The idea isn't as strange as you think. It's strange to me. Marriage should be about love, about what? Passion? Romance?" Jonas's voice was gentle but firm. "Lena, I loved my wife, loved her deeply. But you want to know what made our marriage work? It wasn't grand gestures or constant excitement. It was showing up every day, working together, choosing each other again and again. That's what marriage is. And we already do that." Lena's eyes stung. "I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of failing again. Of disappointing you. Of—" Her voice broke. "Of letting myself hope for something good, only to have it destroyed." Jonas reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. "I can't promise you'll never be disappointed. I'm human. I make mistakes. But I can promise I'll never deliberately hurt you, never use you, never make you feel less than you are. Is that enough to build on?" Lena looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. Jonas Hale, steady, kind, strong Jonas who'd stopped in the rain for a stranger, who'd opened his home without hesitation, who defended her against gossips and offered her a future when she'd thought she had none. "I need time to think," she whispered. "Take all the time you need." He squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. "But know this, whatever you decide, you still have a place here. No pressure, no expectations, just an open door." That night, Lena lay awake long after the household had settled. Marriage to Jonas. The thought circled her mind like a persistent bird. She didn't love him, not the way she'd thought she loved Daniel all those years ago, but maybe that was a good thing. Maybe that girlish infatuation had blinded her to Daniel's faults, made her overlook warning signs that could have saved her heartbreak. What she felt for Jonas was different. Respect, gratitude, trust. A deep appreciation for his character and the way he loved his children. A growing warmth when he smiled at her across the table. A sense of partnership that had developed naturally over 3 weeks of shared work. Was that love? Could it become love? And what about Reed Mercer? If she stayed here unmarried, she remained vulnerable to his manipulation. But as Jonas's wife, she'd have legal protection, a family to stand with her, a name that carried weight in this community. It was practical, sensible even. But marriage should be more than practical, shouldn't it? Lena turned over, punching her pillow in frustration. Through the thin walls, she heard Rose crying out in her sleep. Before she could think, Lena was out of bed and moving through the darkened house to the room the little ones shared. Rose sat up in bed, tears streaming down her face. "Mama," she whimpered. "I want Mama." Lena's heart cracked. She gathered the little girl into her arms, rocking her gently. "Shh, sweetheart, I'm here. You're safe." "I had a bad dream. Mama was there, but then she left, and I couldn't find her, and—" Rose dissolved into fresh sobs. "I know, baby, I know." Lena stroked her hair, murmuring comfort. "Dreams can be scary, but they're not real. You're here, safe and sound. Will you stay until I fall asleep?" "Of course." Lena held Rose until her breathing evened out and she drifted back into sleep. Then she gently laid her down, tucking the blankets around her small form. When she turned to leave, Jonas was standing in the doorway. "You're good with them," he said softly. "With all of them." "They're easy to love." Jonas stepped into the room looking down at his sleeping daughter. Rose doesn't remember her mother well. She was so young when Sarah died. Sometimes I wonder if she's mourning the idea of having a mother more than the actual person. Both are valid to mourn. "I know." Jonas turned to Lena, "but it made me realize something. These children need a mother, Not just someone to cook and clean, but someone who'll hold them when they cry, who'll make their lessons fun, who'll see them for who they are and love them anyway. He paused. They need you, Lena. Jonas, I'm not trying to manipulate you. I'm stating a fact. In 3 weeks, you've become essential to this family. We need you. I need you. His voice dropped. Not just as a helper, as a partner, as someone I can count on when the days are hard and the work seems endless. As someone who understands what it takes to keep all of this, he gestured around from falling apart. Lena's vision blurred. I'm scared, she admitted again. So am I. But maybe that's okay. Maybe being scared means we're taking it seriously, that we understand what we're building could matter. They stood in the dim room, their sleeping children around them, the weight of the decision pressing down like a physical thing. And in that moment, Lena realized something. She might not love Jonas the way poets wrote about love, but she loved this, the life they'd built together in 3 short weeks, the family they'd become, the purpose she'd found in caring for these children who needed her as much as she needed them. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. Ask me, she whispered. Jonas went very still. What? Ask me to marry you, properly, so I can give you a proper answer. In the darkness, she saw his throat work. Then he took her hand, his voice rough with emotion. Lena Crowell, will you marry me? Will you be a mother to my children and a partner in this life we're building? Will you take a chance on us, even though we're both scared and neither of us knows if this will work? Tears spilled down Lena's cheeks. Yes. God help me. Yes. Jonas pulled her into his arms, and Lena felt something settle into place. Not perfect, not magical, but solid and real and true. They would face Reed Mercer together. They would weather the gossip together. They would build a life together, one day at a time, with 9 children and a mountain farm, and hope that refused to die no matter how many times it had been beaten down. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines. Inside, a new family was being forged, not from blood or romance, but from choice and courage, and the stubborn belief that sometimes the best things in life were the ones you built yourself. They told the children the next morning at breakfast. Lena had barely slept, her mind racing between elation and terror. Jonas seemed similarly affected. She'd heard him moving around in the early hours, his footsteps creaking on the floorboards overhead. But when they gathered the family around the table, his hand found hers beneath it, steady and sure. Kids, Jonas began, his voice carrying the weight of importance. Miss Lena and I have something to tell you. 9 pairs of eyes fixed on them with varying degrees of curiosity. Esther bounced in her seat. Jacob was already mid-bite of biscuit. Baby Eliza banged her spoon, oblivious. Miss Lena has agreed to marry me, Jonas continued, which means she'll be staying with us permanently, as part of our family. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then chaos erupted. Esther shrieked with delight and launched herself at Lena, nearly knocking her chair over. Rose started crying, happy tears from the smile on her face. The twins whooped and high-fived each other. Even Jacob grinned, his usual reserve cracking. Only Ruthie sat frozen, her face unreadable. Lena's heart clenched. Of all the children, Ruthie's approval mattered most. The girl had carried so much for so long. Losing her would break something fundamental in this fragile new family. Ruthie? Jonas's voice was gentle. What do you think? The girl's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Are you doing this because you want to, or because Reverend Matthews said you should? Both, Jonas answered honestly. The Reverend made me think about what I already knew, that Lena fits here, that we're better together than apart, that I want her to stay, not as a guest or a helper, but as my wife. Ruthie's gaze shifted to Lena. And you? Are you sure? Because if you're just doing this because you don't have anywhere else to go, I'm sure, Lena interrupted softly. I could find somewhere else. I could go to that boarding house in town, find work, build a different life. But I don't want to. I want to be here, with all of you. Something in Ruthie's expression crumbled. She stood abruptly, crossed to Lena, and threw her arms around her neck. I'm glad, she whispered fiercely. I'm so glad. Lena held the girl tight, blinking back tears. Over Ruthie's shoulder, she saw Jonas watching them with an expression so tender it made her chest ache. "When's the wedding?" Samuel asked practically. "Do we have to dress up?" "Soon," Jonas said. "And yes, you'll dress up. We'll do it simple, just family and a few witnesses at the church. Nothing fancy." "Can I pick flowers?" Esther was already planning. "For your hair, Miss Lena? Mama always said flowers make everything prettier." "I'd love that," Lena managed around the lump in her throat. The meal dissolved into excited chatter as the children planned and plotted. Only Maggie remained quiet, watching Lena with those two serious eyes. After breakfast, while the others scattered to their chores, Maggie approached Lena at the wash basin. "You're not going to leave, are you?" The question was blunt, tinged with an edge of desperation. "Even after you marry Pa? You won't decide it's too hard and go away?" Lena's heart broke for this child who'd learned too young that people could disappear without warning. She knelt down to Maggie's level, taking her small hands. "I'm not going anywhere. I promise you that. Marriage is forever, Maggie. When I stand up in that church and make vows to your father, I'll be making them to all of you too. You're stuck with me." "Good." Maggie's lips trembled. "Because we need you. Ruthie tries so hard, but she's tired. And Pa, he does his best, but he can't be everything. And the little ones, they don't remember having a mama who could make everything feel safe." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I barely remember it myself sometimes." "Then we'll make new memories," Lena promised. "Good ones. Safe ones. Together." Maggie nodded, then surprised Lena by hugging her quickly before darting away, as if embarrassed by the display of emotion. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Reverend Matthews agreed to perform the ceremony that Saturday. Lena altered one of Sarah's dresses, a simple blue cotton that fit her reasonably well with some adjustments. The children cleaned the house from top to bottom, determined everything should be perfect. Jonas rode into town for supplies and returned with a plain gold band that had belonged to his grandmother. "It's not fancy," he said, showing it to Lena privately, "but it's solid, like us." Lena slipped it on her finger, testing the weight. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her. "It's beautiful." Jonas reached out, tilting her chin up so she met his eyes. "Are you having second thoughts?" "Every minute of every day." At his stricken expression, she hurried on. "But not the kind you're thinking. I'm not doubting this decision. I'm just scared I'll mess it up somehow, that I'll fail you and the children." "You won't. You can't know that." "I can. Because I've watched you, Lena. I've seen how you love these kids. Not out of obligation, but genuinely. I've seen you step up when things are hard, not shrink away. Whatever challenges come, we'll face them together." He paused. "That's what marriage is. Facing things together." Before Lena could respond, they heard hoofbeats approaching. Jonas tensed immediately, moving to the window. "It's Sheriff Brennan," he said, surprised. "And he's got company." They went outside to find the sheriff dismounting, along with 2 men Lena didn't recognize. One was older, gray-haired, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. The other was younger, dressed in city clothes that marked him as an outsider. "Jonas, Miss Crowell." Sheriff Brennan nodded to each of them. His weathered face was grave. "I need to ask you some questions. This here is Judge Harrison from the county seat, and Mr. Philip Walsh, an attorney from Denver." Lena's blood ran cold. Denver, where Reed Mercer had connections, where Daniel's family lived. "What's this about, Sheriff?" Jonas asked, his voice carefully neutral. The attorney stepped forward, pulling papers from his satchel. "Miss Crowell, I represent the estate of Daniel Crowell. It has come to our attention that you are in possession of certain valuables that rightfully belong to the estate. We're here to recover those items and discuss the matter of restitution." "I don't have anything that belongs to Daniel's estate," Lena said, forcing her voice steady. "Everything I took when I left was legally mine, gifts from my own family, personal items, nothing more." "That's not what we've been told." Walsh consulted his papers. "According to Mr. Reed Mercer, who witnessed the dissolution of your marriage, you removed a pearl necklace valued at $500, a set of silver candlesticks worth $300, and various other heirlooms totaling approximately $2,000 in value." "That's a lie!" Lena's hands clenched into fists. The pearls were from my grandmother. The candlesticks were a wedding gift from my aunt. Reed Mercer is twisting the truth because I refused his advances. Walsh's expression didn't change. Do you have documentation proving ownership of these items? No, they were gifts. Family doesn't typically provide receipts for. Then we have a problem. Mr. Mercer has provided sworn testimony that these items belong to your former husband. In the absence of proof to the contrary, we must assume his testimony is accurate. This is ridiculous, Jonas interjected. You're taking the word of a man who's been stalking Miss Crowell across state lines, who showed up at my property making threats. Are you accusing Mr. Mercer of misconduct? Judge Harrison spoke for the first time, his voice carrying judicial weight. I'm saying he has ulterior motives for these accusations, Jonas said carefully. Motives or not, the law is clear. If Miss Crowell cannot prove ownership of the items in question, she may be liable for theft. Walsh turned back to Lena. Where are these items now? Lena's mind raced. She'd sold most of her possessions to fund her journey west. The pearls had gone to a jeweler in Kansas City, the candlesticks to a pawnbroker in St. Louis. All of it converted to cash that had paid for wagon passage, supplies, the endless expenses of survival. I sold them, she admitted. Months ago. I needed the money to live. So you've already disposed of stolen property. Walsh made a note. That complicates matters significantly. They weren't stolen. Lena's voice rose. This is all Reed Mercer's doing. He's using Daniel's family to harass me because I refuse to. She couldn't finish, couldn't bring herself to say the words in front of the sheriff and the judge. Jonas moved closer, a wall of support at her back. What exactly are you here to do, gentlemen? We have a warrant for Miss Crowell's arrest on charges of theft, Judge Harrison said heavily. She can come voluntarily, or the sheriff can compel her. Either way, she'll need to return to Denver to face these charges. No. The word came out flat, final. She's not going anywhere. Mr. Hale, I understand your protective instinct, but the law is being manipulated by a man with money and connections to persecute a woman who's done nothing wrong. Jonas's voice was steel. I won't stand by and watch it happen. Sheriff Brennan cleared his throat uncomfortably. Jonas, I know Miss Crowell seems like a good woman, and I got no love for city lawyers coming out here throwing their weight around. But this is a legal matter. I got a warrant signed by a judge. I have to enforce it. Then you'll have to arrest me too, Jonas said, because I'm not letting you take her. Pa, what's happening? They all turned to find the children gathered on the porch, Ruthie holding baby Eliza, the others clustered around her with wide, frightened eyes. Samuel stood at the front, his young face set with protective fury. Go inside, kids, Jonas said quietly. They're trying to take Miss Lena, aren't they? Ruthie's voice shook. We heard. They think she stole things. It's a misunderstanding, Lena managed. I'll sort it out. How? Maggie's voice was small, broken. How do you sort out lies? The question hung in the air, unanswerable. Judge Harrison's expression softened slightly as he looked at the children. Sheriff, perhaps we could delay enforcement of the warrant for a few days. Give Miss Crowell time to arrange her affairs, secure legal representation. And give her time to run, Walsh interjected sharply. Your Honor, with all respect, this woman has already demonstrated a pattern of fleeing from consequences. We need to take her into custody now. She's not running anywhere, Jonas said through gritted teeth. She's getting married on Saturday, to me, in front of the whole community. Does that sound like someone planning to flee? This gave the attorney pause. He exchanged glances with Judge Harrison. Married? The judge studied Jonas, then Lena. This isn't some scheme to avoid prosecution, is it? It's a scheme to build a life, Lena said, finding her voice. I came here looking for a fresh start. I found a man who needed help with his children, who offered me shelter when I had nowhere to go. We're getting married because we choose each other, because we fit, not to avoid anything. Nevertheless, the timing is convenient. Walsh's tone dripped skepticism. The timing is what it is, Jonas shot back, and it doesn't change the fact that these charges are baseless. If you want to take her into custody, you'll have to go through me. And then through half this community, because we don't take kindly to people being railroaded by rich men with grudges." Sheriff Brennan sighed heavily. "Jonas, don't make this harder than it needs to be." "I'm making it exactly as hard as it needs to be." Jonas's jaw set stubbornly. "Tom, you've known me how long? 15 years? Have you ever known me to harbor a criminal? To support someone who was genuinely in the wrong?" The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "No, but—" "Then trust me now. Lena Crowell is innocent. She's being targeted by a man who can't accept that she rejected him. Everything else is window dressing." Judge Harrison was quiet for a long moment, studying the scene before him. The protective man, the frightened woman, the children watching with desperate hope. "Against my better judgment," he said slowly, "I'm going to delay this warrant for 1 week. Miss Crowell will remain in your custody, Mr. Hale. She is not to leave the county. If she runs, you'll be held responsible." "She won't run," Jonas said firmly. "Furthermore, she needs to secure legal counsel immediately. These charges are serious, and they won't disappear just because you don't like them." The judge turned to Lena. "Do you understand the gravity of your situation, Miss Crowell?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Then I suggest you spend the next week preparing a defense. Because when you appear before me, you'll need more than protestations of innocence. You'll need proof." Walsh looked ready to argue, but the judge silenced him with a look. "1 week, counselor. If you can't make your case stronger in that time, perhaps it's not as strong as you think." They left, Walsh radiating displeasure, the sheriff apologetic, the judge inscrutable. Lena watched them ride away, her whole body trembling with reaction. The moment they were out of sight, her knees gave out. Jonas caught her, holding her steady as she fought for breath. "They're going to take me away," she gasped. "They're going to send me to Denver, to jail, to—" "No, they're not." Jonas's voice was absolute. "We have a week. We'll use it." "How? I don't have proof. I don't have documentation. I don't have anything but my word against Reed Mercer's lies." "Then we'll find something." Jonas tilted her face up, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Lena, look at me. You are not alone in this. You have me. You have the children. You have this community, whether they know it yet or not. We will fight this." "Pa's right," Ruthie said from the porch. "We won't let them take you." "We'll tell everyone the truth," Samuel added, "about Mr. Mercer stalking you, about him being creepy." "We'll write letters," Maggie offered, "to your family, to people who knew you before. They can tell the judge you're not a thief." The children's fierce loyalty made Lena's throat close up. These babies, ready to go to war for her, ready to fight grown men with money and power because they believed in her. "Thank you," she whispered. "All of you. But this isn't your battle." "Yes, it is," Ruthie said simply. "You're going to be our mother. That makes it our battle." That night, after the children were in bed, Jonas and Lena sat at the kitchen table with paper and ink, trying to piece together some kind of defense. "Who can testify to your character?" Jonas asked. "People who knew you before your marriage?" "My sister, maybe. Though we haven't spoken since the divorce. She was angry with me for embarrassing the family." "What about your aunt? The one who gave you the candlesticks?" Lena shook her head. "She died 2 years ago. That's part of why I had no proof of ownership. All the people who could vouch for those being gifts are either dead or have cut me off." "That's awfully convenient for Reed Mercer." "I think he knows exactly what he's doing. He waited until I was isolated, until there was no one left to defend me." Jonas drummed his fingers on the table, thinking, "What about the merchants you sold to? The jeweler in Kansas City, the pawnbroker in St. Louis? Would they have records?" "Maybe. But that only proves I sold them, not that I had a right to." "It's something. We can write to them. Ask for any documentation." Jonas made notes. "What else? There has to be something we're missing." Lena closed her eyes, trying to think through the panic. "Margaret, my cousin, the one who told Thomas Reddick about me. She knew about the gifts. She was there when I received some of them. Would she testify for you? I don't know. She betrayed me once already. But maybe she'd feel guilty about it. Maybe if we explained the stakes." A knock at the door interrupted them. Jonas rose warily, his hand going to the rifle mounted above the fireplace. "Who is it?" "Reverend Matthews." Jonas relaxed, opening the door. The Reverend stepped inside, his expression troubled. "I heard about what happened today," he said without preamble. "The whole town's talking. Judge Harrison stopped at the church before leaving, told me about the charges." "And?" Jonas's voice was tight. "Are you here to tell us the wedding's off? That we're too scandalous for your church?" "Jonas Hale, you know me better than that." The Reverend's voice was reproachful. "I'm here to help." Lena looked up, hope flickering. "How?" "I've been a reverend for 40 years. I've married hundreds of couples, presided over countless estates, witnessed God knows how many legal documents." He pulled a chair up to the table, settling in. "I also happen to be quite good friends with Judge Harrison. We studied together at seminary before he went into law and I into ministry." "You think you can influence him?" Jonas asked. "I think I can provide character testimony that he'll actually listen to, and I think I can make some inquiries about this Reed Mercer character. A man with that much spite usually has enemies willing to talk." Lena felt tears prick her eyes. "Why are you doing this for me? You barely know me." "I know enough. I know Jonas trusts you. I know his children have come alive since you arrived. I know you sat with old Mrs. Henderson at church last Sunday, listening to her stories when everyone else was too busy to bother." The Reverend smiled gently. "And I know innocent people don't look at their accusers the way you looked at Reed Mercer, like you were facing the devil himself." "He terrifies me," Lena admitted. "Then we'll make sure he can't hurt you." The Reverend pulled out his own paper and pen. "Now let's start from the beginning. Tell me everything." They talked for hours, the Reverend asking pointed questions, making notes, his legal knowledge evident despite his calling. By the time he left, well past midnight, they had the outline of a defense. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't guaranteed. But it was more than Lena had when the day began. The next few days were a blur of activity. Jonas wrote to the merchants Lena had sold to, requesting documentation. Reverend Matthews sent telegrams to colleagues in Denver, asking about Reed Mercer's reputation. The children, bless them, wrote letters to Lena's family members. Simple, heartfelt appeals for help. On Thursday, 2 days before the wedding, a response came from Kansas City. The jeweler remembered Lena, remembered the pearls. He'd kept records of the transaction, including Lena's statement that they'd been her grandmother's. It wasn't proof of ownership, but it was something. That same day, disaster struck. Lena was hanging laundry when she saw a rider approaching at speed. Her heart sank when she recognized Reed Mercer. He dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, his face twisted with rage. "You think you're clever, don't you, sending your pet reverend to ask questions about me?" "I don't know what you're talking about." Lena stepped back, glancing toward the house. Jonas was in the fields with Samuel. She was alone. "Don't play innocent. I know Matthews has been making inquiries, stirring up trouble." Reed advanced on her. "You need to understand something, Lena. I always get what I want, always, and I want you to pay for embarrassing me." "I never did anything to you. You rejected me. You, a divorced woman with nothing, rejected me." His voice rose, spittle flying. "Do you know how that made me look? How people laughed when word got around that I'd been pursuing you and you'd run away? So this is about your pride. This is about respect, about putting you in your place." Reed grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in painfully. "You're going to drop this defense. You're going to plead guilty, accept your punishment, and maybe I'll speak on your behalf at sentencing, recommend leniency." "Let go of me." Lena tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. "Not until you understand. You can't win this. I have money, lawyers, connections. What do you have? A mountain farmer and his brats?" Reed's laugh was cruel. "They can't protect you. No one can." "I said let go." Lena shoved him hard, surprising him enough that he stumbled back. His expression darkened dangerously. "You little, is there a problem here?" Both of them whirled. Jonas stood 20 feet away, rifle in hand, pointed directly at Reed. His face was calm, but his eyes were deadly. "Mr. Hale." Reed straightened his jacket, trying to recover his composure. "I was just having a conversation with Miss Crowell." "Looked more like assault to me." A misunderstanding. I came to offer assistance, and she became emotional. You're lying, Jonas said flatly. And you're on my property without invitation, putting your hands on my future wife. That gives me the legal right to shoot you for trespassing and assault. You want to test whether I'm bluffing? Reed went pale. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Jonas didn't move, didn't blink. You've got 10 seconds to mount that horse. After that, I start shooting. For a moment, Reed stood frozen. Then survival instinct won over pride. He backed toward his horse, never taking his eyes off Jonas. This isn't over, he hissed. You can't watch her every minute. Eventually, she'll be alone again. And when she is... Jonas fired a shot into the ground near Reed's feet. The man yelped and scrambled onto his horse. Next one won't be a warning, Jonas said calmly. Reed spurred his horse and fled, dust rising in his wake. The moment he was out of sight, Jonas lowered the rifle and rushed to Lena. Are you hurt? Did he? I'm fine. Shaken, but fine. Lena's voice trembled despite her words. Jonas, he's not going to stop. He's going to keep coming, keep threatening, until we stop him. Jonas's jaw set with determination. That's it. I'm done playing nice. Tomorrow, we're going to the sheriff. We're filing charges for harassment, trespassing, assault. And we're telling Judge Harrison everything, including the threat he just made. It's his word against mine. No, it's his word against ours. I heard the threat. I witnessed the assault. Jonas cupped her face gently. You're not alone in this anymore, Lena. Stop acting like you are. That night, neither of them slept. They sat together by the fire, Jonas's arm around Lena's shoulders, both of them listening for hoofbeats that never came. Tell me something, Jonas said quietly, about your life before all this. Something good. Lena thought back through the years of pain to find something bright. I had a garden once, at the house I shared with Daniel. Nothing fancy, just vegetables and some flowers. But there was this one rose bush, pink roses, the prettiest things you ever saw. I'd sit with them in the evenings and just breathe, feel alive. We'll plant roses here, Jonas promised. Pink ones, as many as you want. You don't have to. I want to. I want you to have beautiful things, Lena. You deserve beauty after all the ugliness. Lena leaned her head against his shoulder, letting herself draw strength from his solid presence. Tomorrow they would go to the sheriff. Tomorrow they would fight back against Reed's manipulation. But tonight, in this quiet moment, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would be all right. Jonas? Thank you. For stopping. For staying. For fighting for me when you had no reason to. His arm tightened around her. I had every reason. You matter, Lena. To me. To the children. You matter, and people who matter are worth fighting for. Outside, a storm was building. She could smell rain on the wind, hear thunder in the distance. But inside, wrapped in Jonas's warmth and protection, Lena felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt safe. Friday morning dawned gray and threatening, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Lena dressed carefully in her borrowed clothes, her hands trembling as she buttoned the bodice. Today, they would confront Reed's accusations head-on. Today, everything would either fall into place or fall apart completely. Jonas was already at the breakfast table when she emerged, fully dressed despite the early hour. The children were unusually quiet, sensing the tension that filled the house like smoke. I want to come with you, Ruthie said as Jonas prepared to hitch the wagon. To the sheriff's office. Whatever happens, I want to be there. Me too, Samuel added. Jonas shook his head. This isn't something for children to... We're not children, Ruthie interrupted, her voice steady. Not anymore. We stopped being children the day Mama died and we had to grow up to survive. We deserve to be there. To stand with Miss Lena. Jonas looked at Lena, questioning. She felt her throat tighten at the fierce loyalty in Ruthie's eyes. Let them come, she said softly. They've earned the right. The ride into Millbrook was tense and silent. Ruthie sat beside Lena in the back of the wagon, her hand gripping Lena's with surprising strength. Samuel sat up front with his father, his young shoulders squared with determination. Sheriff Brennan was in his office when they arrived, along with someone Lena hadn't expected, Reverend Matthews. and standing beside him, a woman Lena recognized with a jolt of shock. "Margaret?" Lena's voice came out strangled. Her cousin stood nervously by the window, her hands twisting a handkerchief. She looked older than Lena remembered, worn down by something Lena couldn't name. "I'm sorry," Margaret blurted out before anyone else could speak. "Lena, I'm so sorry for what I did, for telling Thomas about everything. I didn't know he would use it against you like that. I thought he deserved to know the truth, but I should have let you tell him yourself." "What are you doing here?" Lena managed. "Reverend Matthews contacted me, told me what was happening about Reed Mercer's accusations." Margaret's eyes filled with tears, and I remembered things. Things I'd pushed aside because they made me uncomfortable, about how Reed used to watch you when he visited, how he'd find excuses to be alone with you, how angry he got when you left Daniel. Sheriff Brennan leaned forward in his chair. "Mrs. Harper, why don't you tell Miss Crowell what you told me this morning?" Margaret took a shaky breath. "After you left, Reed came to see me. Multiple times. He asked questions about where you'd gone, who you'd been in contact with. He seemed obsessed, and then he started offering money, said if I could provide information proving you'd stolen from Daniel's estate, he'd pay handsomely." Lena's blood ran cold. "He tried to bribe you?" "Yes, at first I refused. But then..." Margaret's voice broke. "My husband lost his business. We were desperate. Reed offered $500 for testimony that the pearls, the candlesticks, all of it belonged to Daniel. $500 we desperately needed." "Did you take it?" Jonas's voice was hard. "No, I almost did, God help me, but I couldn't, because it would have been a lie." Margaret looked at Lena with anguished eyes. "Those pearls were grandmother's. She gave them to you on your 16th birthday. I was there. I watched her fasten them around your neck and tell you they'd been in our family for 3 generations. "You remember that?" Lena whispered. "I remember everything. The candlesticks were from Aunt Beatrice, a wedding gift. The silver brush set was from your mother. All of it yours, freely given." Margaret pulled papers from her reticule with shaking hands. "I brought proof, letters from our grandmother mentioning the pearls. The original gift card from Aunt Beatrice with the candlesticks, everything I could find." Sheriff Brennan took the papers, examining them carefully. "This is good, real good, but it doesn't explain why Mr. Mercer is so determined to pursue these charges." "I can explain that," Reverend Matthews said quietly. "I've received some interesting telegrams over the past few days. Reed Mercer has a history. 3 other women in Denver have reported his unwanted attentions. Women in vulnerable positions, widows, divorcees, women without male protection. When they rejected him, he found ways to make their lives difficult. Legal troubles, ruined reputations, forced relocations." "He's done this before?" Lena felt sick. "Multiple times. But he's clever. Nothing ever sticks because he has money and lawyers and friends in the right places." The women were never believed. The Reverend's expression was grim. Until now. Because this time, he made a mistake. He went after someone who wasn't alone. The door banged open. Reed Mercer strode in, flanked by the attorney Walsh. He stopped short when he saw the assembled group, his eyes narrowing. "What is this? Some kind of ambush?" "This is called justice, Mr. Mercer," Sheriff Brennan said calmly. "We're just having a discussion about your accusations against Miss Crowell. The accusations are legitimate and backed by legal authority. I don't see what there is to discuss." "Then you won't mind answering a few questions." The sheriff gestured to a chair. "Have a seat." Reed remained standing, his posture rigid with barely controlled anger. "I don't have to answer anything. The warrant speaks for itself." "The warrant is based on your testimony," Reverend Matthews interjected. "Testimony we've discovered may be less than truthful." "That's slander, is it?" The Reverend pulled out his own papers. "I have statements here from 3 women in Denver describing a pattern of harassment remarkably similar to what Miss Crowell has experienced. I also have documentation showing you offered Mrs. Harper money in exchange for false testimony." Reed's face went white, then red. "Those women are lying. They're bitter, scorned creatures trying to destroy my reputation." "All of them?" Jonas stepped forward, his presence intimidating despite his quiet voice. 3 different women, all telling the same story? That's quite a conspiracy. You know nothing about, I know you threatened Miss Crowell on my property yesterday. I heard you tell her she couldn't hide forever. I watched you grab her. Jonas's hands clenched into fists. That's assault, Mr. Mercer. In front of a witness. Walsh, who'd been silent until now, cleared his throat. Mr. Mercer, perhaps we should discuss this privately. There's nothing to discuss. Reed's composure was cracking, revealing the rage beneath. This woman humiliated me. She needs to be punished. The room went dead silent. So you admit it, Sheriff Brennan said slowly. This isn't about theft. It's about revenge. Reed seemed to realize what he'd said. I didn't mean, that's not what I... You just confessed to filing false charges motivated by personal vendetta, the sheriff continued. In front of witnesses, including an attorney and a judge. Oh yes, Judge Harrison asked me to keep him informed of developments. You can't prove the charges are false. Reed was sweating now, his careful facade crumbling. My testimony is as valid as anyone's. Except we have proof now. Margaret stepped forward, her voice stronger than before. Proof that everything Lena took was legally hers. Proof that you tried to bribe me to lie. Proof that you have a pattern of harassing vulnerable women. Proof that you assaulted Miss Crowell on my property, Jonas added. That's not civil anymore, Mercer. That's criminal. Reed looked around wildly, finding no allies. Even Walsh had stepped away, distancing himself from his client's meltdown. This is ridiculous, Reed tried one last time. You're all ganging up on me because of this. This woman who means nothing. She's divorced, barren, worthless. Why are you protecting her? Because she's not worthless, Ruthie said clearly from where she stood by the door. She's brave and kind, and she makes my father smile again. She helps us with our lessons and holds us when we cry and makes our house feel like a home. That's not worthless. That's everything, Reed sneered. A child's opinion means nothing. Maybe not, Sheriff Brennan said, but mine does. And based on what I've heard today, I'm arresting you, Reed Mercer, for filing false charges, attempted bribery, and assault. Mr. Walsh, your client is going to need a real good lawyer. You can't arrest me, Reed backed toward the door. I have rights. I have... He never finished. Jonas moved with surprising speed, blocking the exit. You're not running, not this time. 2 deputies appeared, responding to the sheriff's signal. They took Reed by the arms as he struggled and shouted, dragging him toward the cells in the back. This isn't over, Reed's voice echoed down the hallway. I'll get out. I have connections. I'll make you all pay. The door slammed shut, cutting off his threats. Walsh gathered his papers with shaking hands. Sheriff, I had no idea. If I'd known the charges were fraudulent. Save it for the judge, Brennan said wearily. You might want to consider who you represent more carefully in the future. The attorney fled, leaving the rest of them standing in stunned silence. Is it really over? Lena finally asked, afraid to believe. The charges will be dropped, Sheriff Brennan confirmed. And with Mercer in custody, he can't threaten you anymore. Judge Harrison will want formal statements from everyone, but the worst is past. Lena's knees went weak. Jonas caught her, steadying her as relief crashed over her in waves. Thank you, she managed, looking around at the people who'd stood with her. Jonas, Ruthie, Samuel, Reverend Matthews, even Margaret. All of you. I don't know how to... You don't have to thank us, Margaret said, wiping her eyes. I should be begging your forgiveness, for betraying your confidence, for almost taking his money, for not being strong enough to stand with you sooner. Lena crossed to her cousin and pulled her into a fierce hug. You're here now. That's what matters. They held each other, 2 women who'd been torn apart by circumstance finding their way back to family. There's still tomorrow, Ruthie said tentatively. The wedding. Is it still? Absolutely, Jonas said firmly, unless Lena's changed her mind. Lena looked at this man who'd fought for her, protected her, believed in her when she could barely believe in herself. Not a chance. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having passed in the night. Lena woke to find the children already bustling with preparations. Esther and Rose had picked wildflowers from the meadow, daisies and black-eyed Susans and delicate mountain bluebells. Ruthie had pressed Lena's blue dress until it looked nearly new. Maggie had baked a cake, lopsided but made with love. Margaret had stayed overnight, helping with the final preparations. Now she stood in Lena's small room, fastening the pearl necklace, the same pearls that had caused so much trouble, around Lena's neck. "You look beautiful," Margaret said softly. "Happy." "I am happy. Terrified, but happy." "That's normal. I was terrified on my wedding day too." Margaret adjusted the necklace, meeting Lena's eyes in the small mirror. "But Jonas is a good man, nothing like Daniel. He'll cherish you the way you deserve." "I know." And she did know. These past weeks had shown her what real partnership looked like, what it meant to be valued, respected, chosen. A knock at the door. "Miss Lena?" Rose's voice was excited. "Pa says it's time." The church was small, packed with Jonas's neighbors and friends. Lena recognized faces from town. Mr. Hutchins from the general store, Doc Morrison, farmers Jonas had mentioned. Even Mrs. Talbot was there, though she looked decidedly uncomfortable. But Lena barely saw them. Her eyes found Jonas at the front of the church, wearing his best suit, his hair neatly combed, his face full of quiet joy. The children stood with him, 9 beautiful children who were about to become hers. Margaret walked her down the aisle, and when they reached the front, squeezed her hand before taking a seat. Reverend Matthews smiled at them both. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Jonas Hale and Lena Crowell. Marriage is not to be entered into lightly, but reverently, deliberately, and in accordance with the purposes for which it was instituted by God." Lena barely heard the words. She was too focused on Jonas's hands holding hers, steady and warm. On the children's faces, glowing with happiness. On the impossible miracle of this moment, her, standing in a church, marrying a good man, surrounded by people who wanted her there. "Jonas," the Reverend was saying, "do you take Lena to be your lawfully wedded wife? To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do you part?" "I do." Jonas's voice was clear, certain. "And Lena, do you take Jonas to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do you part?" Lena took a breath, thought of the journey that had brought her here, the rejection, the rain, the stranger who'd stopped when he didn't have to, the family who'd opened their hearts, the man who'd fought for her when no one else would. "I do," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Jonas slipped his grandmother's ring onto her finger, the same ring she'd tried on days ago, now officially, permanently hers. "By the power vested in me," Reverend Matthews declared, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Jonas, you may kiss your bride." Jonas leaned in, and their lips met in a kiss that was gentle, chaste, but full of promise. The church erupted in applause, the children loudest of all. They walked back down the aisle together, husband and wife, and Lena felt something settle deep in her soul. This was real. This was hers. This was home. The celebration afterward was simple but joyful. Someone had brought a fiddle, and there was dancing in the churchyard. The children ran wild, fueled by cake and happiness. Margaret pulled Lena aside at one point, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so happy for you," she said, "and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I ever doubted you, that I let you think you were alone. We're family," Lena said simply. "We're allowed to make mistakes. What matters is we find our way back." As the sun began to set, Jonas and Lena loaded the children into the wagon for the ride home. Ruthie held sleeping Eliza. Rose curled up against Lena's side. The boys chattered about the celebration, already planning how they'd tell the story of the wedding for years to come. "Happy?" Jonas asked quietly, his hand finding Lena's. "More than I knew was possible." "Good. Because this is just the beginning." He was right. It was the beginning of their life together, a life that would have challenges and struggles, joys and sorrows. But they would face it all together, this patchwork family forged from loss and choice and stubborn hope. 3 months later, Lena stood in her garden, the garden Jonas had helped her plant, tending the rose bushes that were just beginning to bud. Pink roses, just like she'd remembered, just like he'd promised. Inside the house, she could hear chaos. Jacob and Daniel arguing over whose turn it was to feed the chickens. Esther practicing her reading aloud, stumbling over difficult words. Ruthie teaching Rose a song their mother used to sing. Jonas emerged from the barn, saw her, and smiled. That smile that still made her heart skip, even now. He crossed the yard, pulling her into his arms. "How are you feeling?" Lena rested her hand on her belly, where a tiny life was growing. The doctor had confirmed it last week. She was pregnant. After years of believing she was barren, after the shame and the certainty that she'd never bear children, here was proof that everything she'd been told was a lie. Scared, she admitted, excited, overwhelmed. "Normal, then." Jonas kissed her forehead. "We'll face it together, all of it." "All 10 children?" She laughed at his expression. "What? You didn't think 9 was enough?" "9 was perfect. 10 is going to be interesting." From the house, Ruthie called out, "Pa, Miss Lena, supper's ready." "We should go in," Jonas said. But Lena held him there a moment longer, looking at the house bursting with life, the children she loved as fiercely as if she'd borne them herself, the roses beginning to bloom. A year ago, she'd been broken, rejected, certain she had nothing left to offer the world. She'd stood in the rain believing her life was over. She'd been so wrong. Her life hadn't ended that day. It had begun. The moment a mountain man with 9 children stopped and said, "You need a place, we need one too." Now she had both. A place and a purpose. A family and a future. A man who chose her every single day, and children who called her Ma without hesitation. And in 7 months she'd hold a baby of her own. Proof that she'd never been broken, only bruised. That second chances existed, that sometimes the best things in life came after you'd given up hope. "Lena?" Jonas was watching her with concern. "You're crying." "Happy tears," she said, smiling through them. "Just happy tears." They walked to the house together, hand in hand. Through the window, she could see the children gathered around the table, waiting. Her children. Her family. Thomas Reddick had rejected her, but he'd done her the greatest favor of her life. Because if he'd accepted her, she never would have stumbled into the rain, never would have collapsed under that sycamore tree, never would have been found by the man who saw her worth when she couldn't see it herself. Reed Mercer was in jail, awaiting trial. The charges against her had been dropped. The gossips had moved on to other scandals. And she was exactly where she was meant to be. That evening, after supper, after the dishes were washed and the children tucked into bed, Lena sat at the table and began to write. Not to herself, but to women like her. Women who'd been told they weren't enough. Women trapped in bad marriages or running from dangerous men. Women who thought they were broken beyond repair. She told them her story. About rejection and rain and a family that chose her. About standing up to lies and finding the courage to hope again. About how the darkest moments could lead to the brightest futures. When she finished, she showed the letter to Jonas. "You're going to send this?" he asked after reading. "I'm going to send it to every Women's Aid Society, every church, every boarding house between here and Denver. If my story can help even one woman find her courage, it's worth it." Jonas pulled her close. "You're remarkable, you know that? I'm just someone who got lucky, who found people willing to fight for her." "No, you're someone who kept fighting even when it seemed hopeless. Someone who chose to believe in second chances." He kissed her gently. "That's not luck. That's strength." Over the following months, letters began to arrive. Women thanking her, women asking for advice, women sharing their own stories of escape and survival and building new lives from the ashes of old ones. Lena answered every single letter. She became a beacon, a voice for women who'd been silenced. The house in the mountains became known as a safe place. Women passing through would sometimes stop, seeking shelter, advice, connection. Jonas never complained, never said their home was too crowded or too busy. He simply expanded the table, added beds in the barn, and welcomed each woman the way he'd once welcomed Lena. We're collecting strays, he said one night, smiling as yet another woman settled into the spare room. We're giving people hope, Lena corrected, the way you gave it to me. Years passed. The children grew. Ruthie married a kind farmer and started her own family. Samuel took over more of the ranch work. The younger ones thrived, secure in the knowledge that they were loved. And Lena's daughter, Grace, named for the undeserved gift she represented, grew into a bright, fierce child who knew nothing of shame or unworthiness. She grew up surrounded by siblings who adored her, parents who chose each other every day, and a constant stream of women finding their strength. On Grace's 5th birthday, Lena stood on the porch watching her daughter play with her siblings. The pink roses were in full bloom, their scent perfuming the air. Jonas came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Lena leaned back against him, watching her family, her beautiful, chaotic family, and smiled. "I'm thinking about rain," she said, "and how sometimes the storms we think will destroy us are actually leading us exactly where we need to be." Jonas kissed the top of her head. "Best storm of my life." "Mine too." Because that was the truth of it. Lena had been rejected, humiliated, left alone in the mountains with nothing but shame and a sodden letter dissolving in her hands. She'd thought it was an ending, but it had been a beginning. The beginning of everything that mattered. She was no longer the woman who'd been told she wasn't enough. She was Lena Hale, wife, mother, advocate, survivor. She was the woman who'd walked through rain and fire and come out stronger. The woman who'd built a family not from blood, but from choice and courage and love. And as she stood there, surrounded by the life she'd built from the ashes of her old one, Lena Crowell Hale finally understood the truth she'd been searching for all along. She had always been enough. She had always been worthy. She had always been exactly who she was meant to be. It had just taken a mountain man and 9 children, now 10, to help her see it. The end.